"Why waste two lives when we can waste yours?" Dad said. "My parents asked me to confess to a hit and run for my sister. When I refused, they disowned me." Imagine standing in a police station, your world collapsing, only to have your own parents look you in the eyes and beg you to give up everything, including your freedom, future, and very identity for the sake of your sister's crime. That night I realized that some families choose appearance over honesty, and some lives appear to be worth less than others. Main narrative. The air in the precinct was thick with the stale aroma of burned coffee and despair. My hands trembled in my lap as I sat across from Detective Daniel Mercer, painfully aware of my parents' quiet, unbreakable wall shielding Scarlett, my younger sister. Her mascara had run black rivers down her flawless cheeks, making her appear even more gorgeous in her feigned grief. My mother's fingers constantly caressed Scarlett's hair, muttering calming things that I had never heard aimed at me. Someone needs to accept responsibility for this. Detective Daniel Mercer's words broke through the tension, and his eyes shifted between us. "The evidence suggests that one of you was behind the wheel during the hit and run. Mrs. Evelyn Parker is currently in serious condition." My father then took a step forward, wearing a mask I recognized all too well, the one he wore while making cold, calculating business choices, assessing costs and benefits with harsh precision. "Officer," he started, "my daughters are here to fully cooperate. We simply need a moment to discuss this as a family." They escorted me into a small, antiseptic side room. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, giving everything a sickening yellow tint. Scarlett collapsed onto a chair, burying her face in her hands, her tears reverberating against the austere walls. My mother hurried to her, cuddling her as if she were still 6 years old rather than 24. Then my father turned to me, his look imprinted on my mind, something I can still see when I close my eyes. "Claire Bennett," he replied, his voice bland and devoid of emotion. "We need you to let them know you were driving." The words struck me like a physical blow, removing the breath from my lungs. "What?" "No." Scarlett was driving. I wasn't even inside the car. My speech was a frantic and choked murmur. Without looking at me, my mother spoke out. "Your sister has a whole life ahead of her. She has recently been admitted to graduate school. James wants to marry her. She is going to do something meaningful with her life. In contrast to you, the insinuation lingered in the air like toxic gas. I'd heard it 1,000 times in my life, in every subtle gesture and disdainful look. This is ridiculous. I was not there. The truth will come out." I pleaded, turned to Scarlett, hoping she'd speak out and tell them this was ridiculous. She merely sobbed more, her expression disguised. My father's voice lowered, taking on the frightening tone he used when completing difficult negotiations, knowing he had the upper hand. "You are 29 years old, Claire Bennett. You work in a supermarket shop. You reside in a studio apartment. You've never done something noteworthy with your opportunities." "Scarlett would not survive jail," Mom said, finally catching my gaze. Her eyes were chilly, assessing. "Look at her. She's delicate. She's sensitive. But you're stronger. You've always been the tough one." "What are you referring to?" The words flowed out before I could stop them, expressing the hidden reality that had defined every family relationship for as long as I could remember. My mother blushed, but she did not deny it. "You're being theatrical. This is about practicality. Scarlett has opportunities that you will never have. Why squander two futures when we can only waste one?" Something inside me solidified at that instant. Hard, cold, and completely clear. When I looked at the lady who gave birth to me, I saw a stranger. Someone who had calculated my worth and determined that I was worthless. "Dear responsibility," as the older sister, Dad instructed, his tone condescending. "For once in your life, contribute to this family." I walked out of the room without uttering another word. My legs felt like lead, yet my back was ramrod straight. I gave Detective Daniel Mercer the complete truth about everything. Scarlett contacted me that night, distraught, and begged me to come to the police station for help. She'd been driving intoxicated when she hit Mrs. Evelyn Parker in a crossing, and became terrified. Our parents had arrived before me, already devising a horrible plot. The sight on my mother's face as I made my remark drove me through all that followed. My hands shook as I answered the detective's inquiries, but my voice remained firm. He was patient and systematic, meticulously recording every detail. My parents' features were distorted with wrath when I looked through the glass in the interview room. Dad paced like a caged beast. Mom wrapped her arm over Scarlett, who had slumped again, no longer sobbing but glaring at me with absolute loathing. "Let me make sure I understand," Detective Daniel Mercer remarked, going over his notes. "Your sister called you around 11:53 p.m. and asked you to meet her at the station. She didn't explain why over the phone." "No," I said, throwing my arms over myself, feeling cold despite the tight atmosphere. "She kept repeating she needed me, that something bad had happened. I suspected she'd been attacked or robbed." She sounded afraid. "When you arrived, your parents were already there, and they took Scarlett to a private room first." "Yes," I affirmed, and the recollection made my stomach churn. When I stepped in, Dad quickly began detailing their strategy. They had already made all their decisions. They only needed me to agree. Detective Daniel Mercer put down his notepad and studied me with a look I couldn't decipher. "Miss Claire Bennett, what you are doing requires bravery. The most difficult instances are generally family-related. They're no longer my family." I heard myself say it, and the words seemed more genuine than anything I'd ever said as they left my mouth. The investigator excused himself to consult with his colleagues. I remained alone in that room for about 50 minutes, watching the clock tick by as my old existence faded away, second after torturous second. Through the glass I watched my parents gesticulating fiercely, Dad's face flushed with rage. A uniformed cop stepped between them and the interview room door, evidently to keep them from breaking in. When Detective Daniel Mercer returned, he was joined by another officer, a woman with gentle eyes who introduced herself as Sergeant Rebecca Hayes. She sat across from me with a lovely grin. "We're going to need you to give a formal statement," she stated. "Everything you remember from the phone call, the timeline, what your parents said to you. Can you do that?" I blushed. My throat felt constricted, but my determination was hardening into something stronger than diamond. They had made their decision on who I am. Now I was creating mine. The formal announcement took an additional 2 hours and 15 minutes. They prompted me to repeat some things numerous times, looking for contradictions. I knew what they were doing, which confirmed that I was telling the truth and that this was not a malicious fiction motivated by sibling rivalry. "Has there been any recent tension between you and your sister?" Sergeant Rebecca Hayes inquired. I agreed that there has always been tension, but not necessarily fighting. Rather, it was as if she existed in the light and I resided in her shade. That was exactly how our family operated. "Could you elaborate?" I took a big breath, attempting to articulate dynamics that had always been. Scarlett was the one who was attractive, intelligent, and had potential. I was just there. My parents made this plain in 1,000 tiny ways. Better clothing for her, fancier birthday celebrations, and more focus on her concerns. I learnt to become invisible. That must have been painful. It was natural, I explained, letting out a sour laugh. At least I assumed it was. Perhaps every family has a scapegoat and a favored child. I just happened to be born in the incorrect role. Sergeant Rebecca Hayes and Detective Daniel Mercer shared an unintelligible gaze. She took a few more notes before continuing. "Is this the first time they've asked you to make a sacrifice for your sister?" The query led to an unexpected outcome. Despite their age, memories came flooding back, vivid and stinging. "I was 16 when I started my first job," I explained slowly as I bagged groceries at the downtown grocery. "I saved every penny for over a year in order to attend the school trip to Washington, D.C., which cost $950. "Have you gone?" Scarlett's automobile broke down 10 days before her vacation. She was 18 years old and had recently received her driver's license. Dad explained that the family couldn't afford both the repair and my vacation. He used my funds to fix her automobile. The previous hurt felt remote, like if it had occurred to someone else. Scarlett traveled to prom in the automobile. I looked at the school trip images on Facebook. "Have your parents paid you back?" They claimed I was selfish for asking, and that family requires sacrifice. I informed them about our college fund, which existed until Scarlett decided she wanted to attend an expensive private institution. My funds had been sucked into hers. I'd been informed that community college was totally suitable for someone with my grades. I told them about how I won a regional painting competition in high school, which was the only thing I'd ever been truly excellent at. My parents had missed the award ceremony since it clashed with Scarlett's volleyball match. Mom hadn't even glanced up from cooking supper when I returned home with my award and $75 reward. "That's wonderful, sweetheart," she'd replied absently. "Can you set the table?" "We're eating early because Scarlett has practice." The ribbon had disappeared into a drawer. Scarlett's volleyball trophies adorned the mantel. "Why didn't you leave?" Sergeant Rebecca Hayes inquired. "Once you were 19 you could have walked away." "Where would I go?" Even I thought the question sounded naive. I had no money, no vehicle and no support system. And a part of me kept believing that if I simply pushed more, performed better, or proved myself in some way, they'd eventually notice me. And tonight, I met her gaze straight. Tonight I finally understand. They will never see me. Not in the manner I needed them to. They regarded me as expendable. So I'm getting rid of them instead. The subscribe line is halfway through. By the way, if you're still with me after that, please click the subscribe button. Trust me, I have more stories that will make your mouth drop, and I do not want you to miss out. After I concluded my statement, they told me to wait while they interrogated my sister. I sat in a different room, nursing horrible coffee from a vending machine and watching the minutes tick away on the wall clock. It was after 3:18 in the morning. A victim advocate whose name I don't recall came to check on me. She was young, perhaps just a few years older than myself, with worn eyes that said she had seen too much. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" she was wondering. The question had not even occurred to me. "I have an apartment." "Will your parents know how to find you?" "Of course they will. They'd arrive full of fury and blame." The concept made me feel sick. "I can link you with resources," the advocate said, handing me a card. "Counseling services and temporary housing. What you are going through is a sort of familial trauma." I received her card but knew I wasn't going to call. I handled it the same way I managed everything else. Alone, silently, and without asking for aid that may not come. Detective Daniel Mercer discovered me about 4:45 a.m. He seemed fatigued, yet satisfied. "Your sister confessed." The evidence was overwhelming. Traffic camera evidence, paint transfer on her car, and her own blood alcohol test taken tonight. Her tale kept shifting. But she finally acknowledged to everything. Relief surged through me so strongly that I felt dizzy. What will happen now? She will be properly charged. Given the seriousness of the offenses, DUI, hit and run, escaping the scene of an injury accident, she faces considerable prison time. Your testimony will be vital throughout the trial. I'll be there as promised, whatever you need. He looked at me for a moment. Your folks are still inside the building. If you wish to avoid them, we may take you out by the rear entrance. I examined this and then shook my head. I'll stroll out the front. I'm not hiding anymore. They waited in the lobby. Dad stood with his arms folded, his face like a thundercloud. Mom sat slumped on a plastic chair, appearing hollowed out, having aged a decade in one night. Scarlett was nowhere to be seen. She was most likely already processed and being jailed for arraignment. Dad's gaze fixed on me with a ferocity that would have horrified a younger me. "You've destroyed this family." "You destroyed it yourself," I responded, my voice cool and steady. "When you decided one daughter was worth more than the other, I just refused to go along with it." Mom eventually glanced up, her voice a hoarse whisper. "She's your sister. How could you do this to her? She is a drunk motorist who left someone to die on the street. How will you defend her? Were your parents?" Mom's voice trembled after everything we had done for you. "Like what?" The inquiry came out harsher than I had hoped, fueled by years of hidden hatred. "They fed me and offered me a room. That is the very minimum of parental obligation, not a debt I owe you." Dad moved closer, his voice lowering to a menacing whisper. "If you walk out that door, you're dead to us. No longer relatives or support. You will have nothing." I smiled and I could see it upset him. It wasn't a cheerful grin, but one of deep and freeing truth. "I already have nothing from you," I responded, staring him straight in the eye. "At least now I'm free." I moved past them into the early morning darkness. The sky was just starting to brighten around the edges, that deep, bruised blue that precedes morning. My car was alone in the parking lot, and I drove home via vacant streets, feeling lighter than I have in years. The next weeks were a jumble of court hearings, paperwork, and increasingly furious communications from my parents. They recruited a lawyer who attempted to undermine my testimony, portraying me as a jealous, vengeful sister who had invented proof out of rage. The traffic camera evidence rendered that scenario implausible, but they still tried. Then Mrs. Evelyn Parker's family contacted the prosecutor's office to see if they might meet with me. I consented, frightened of confronting the lady whose life my sister had nearly taken. Mrs. Evelyn Parker was in a wheelchair when I met her. Her daughter, Natalie Parker, was gently wheeling her into the victim services office where we'd agreed to meet. She was smaller than I expected, with gray hair and trembling hands, yet her eyes were keen and compassionate. "You're Claire Bennett," she remarked, looking at my face. "You look like you haven't slept in weeks." "Neither do you," I said, then quickly regretted my bluntness. But she laughed, which sounded like rustling leaves. "I like honesty. Sit down, dear. Let's talk." We spent 2 hours together. She described the accident from her perspective. Crossing the street after her book club meeting, the unexpected impact, waking up in the hospital unable to move her legs, months of physical rehabilitation, financial ruin, and nightmares that still awakened her at 3:18 a.m. I kept saying, "I'm so sorry," as if I could somehow apologize for my sister's conduct. "You didn't do this," Mrs. Evelyn Parker stated firmly. "And according to the police, you're the only one in your family who tried to make it right. Your parents actually approached my daughter. Did you know that?" I felt my blood become cold. "What?" Natalie Parker took out her phone and showed me a stored voicemail. My father's distinct voice echoed around the little space. "Hello, Mrs. Evelyn Parker. This is Robert Ashford. I am phoning to negotiate a settlement. My daughter committed a terrible mistake, but she's young and has a long future ahead of her. I'm willing to pay big cash if you're willing to speak with the prosecution about lowering the charges." He attempted to purchase her silence. I should not have been astonished, but I still was. "I told him to go to hell," Natalie Parker stated simply. "Your sister nearly killed my mother and drove away. No amount of money changes that." Mrs. Evelyn Parker stretched over and clasped my hand with shaking fingers. "But you said the truth. In a family that plainly prioritizes image over integrity, you chose the correct thing. That requires a level of guts that most people never have to find." Her remarks stuck with me throughout the trial, through my sister's 5-year sentence, and through my parents' final cruel texts informing me I was no longer their daughter. Scarlett was convicted and sentenced to 5 years. Mom and Dad recruited the best lawyers money could buy, but the evidence was overwhelming. Traffic cameras, paint samples, and testimony from a jogger who witnessed the entire incident. My sister's blood alcohol level had nearly doubled the legal limit. I packed my studio apartment the day after the sentencing. My phone was continually ringing with calls from my parents, which I directed to voicemail. The messages became increasingly nasty as they realized I was not going to respond. The first one from Mom was nearly conciliatory. "Claire Bennett, we need to discuss this. You have made your point." By the 6th, her genuine sentiments had surfaced. "You ruined your sister's life out of spite. I knew you were envious of her, but I never imagined you'd be that cruel." Dad's messages centered on realism. "Scarlett's actions were wrong, but your tenacity has cost this family hundreds of thousands of dollars in court bills. Your sister's future is wrecked. I hope you can live with it." I could. I slept better than I have in years. I relocated to Portland, which is 3 states distant from my family in Ohio. I enrolled at community college using the money I had earned from working extra shifts at the grocery store. The plan had always existed, hidden behind years of their low expectations and my own resigned acquiescence. Now nothing could stop me. My academic supervisor, Dr. Allison Walsh, was the first person to see my potential. She became very interested in my placement tests as she studied them. "Have you ever considered majoring in computer science? These analytical results are extraordinary." I barely finished high school. I acknowledged that my family had always felt I was not college material. Dr. Walsh took off her spectacles and studied me with keen brown eyes. "Your family was mistaken. I have been doing this for 28 years. You have aptitude." Those words altered everything. I plunged myself into my studies with feverish concentration. Programming languages made more sense to me than anything else. There were laws, logic, and issues with obvious answers. Work yielded results. Effort matters. The first semester was terrible. I had been out of school for 11 years, and my study abilities were almost non-existent. Everything my peers appeared to know immediately, such as how to take notes, prepare for examinations, and handle several deadlines, I had to learn by trial and error. I failed my first programming midterm. After that, I sat in my car and grieved for 25 minutes, believing that my parents were correct all along. Then I wiped my eyes, went to Dr. Walsh's office hours, and requested assistance. She did not sugarcoat it. "You've fallen behind. Your basics are weak. But you're also one of the most driven pupils I've met. Determination can accomplish a lot." She linked me with a tutor, a doctoral student called Kevin O'Connor, who was infinitely patient with my foolish queries. We gathered 4 times a week in the library to go through difficulties until the principles resonated. Slowly and gradually, I began to realize. I earned an A/B on my 3rd midterm. I received an A on my final test. Kevin O'Connor gave me a high five after the grades were released. "Do you know what the difference was?" he said with shining eyes. "You overcame your fear of making mistakes. You simply continued trying till you had it right." His observation cut harder than he realized. I'd spent my whole life terrified of being incorrect, because being wrong meant proving my parents correct about me. But in this new world I was creating, being incorrect just meant I hadn't learnt anything yet. There was no guilt in it, only opportunity. The next semester I took 6 classes and worked 28 hours a week at a tiny computer firm to pay my bills. Sleep became an unaffordable luxury. I lived on instant ramen and coffee, studying in my spare time between work and school. Marcus Grant, the owner, recognized my devotion. He had begun the firm in his garage 6 years ago, and grew it with pure, stubborn persistence, a road I recognized in myself. "You're going to burn out if you keep this pace," he cautioned me one evening, when he discovered me debugging code at 1:10 a.m. "I can't afford to slow down," I explained simply. "I'm making up for lost time." "Lost time from what?" I said, offering a truncated version of my narrative. The family that had abandoned me, my sister in prison, and the decision that had cost me everything while also giving me everything. Marcus listened without interrupting, his gaze becoming contemplative. After I finished, he sat back in his chair and nodded once. "My parents wanted me to become a doctor," he explained. "Traditional, prestigious, and honorable. I dropped out of medical school to write code in my garage. They did not talk with me for 3 years. Did they finally come around? Eventually. But by then, I had realized I no longer needed their approval." He waved around the workplace of the firm he'd founded. "This is mine. They can accept or reject it. Regardless, it exists." That exchange changed how I saw my own journey. I'd been fleeing from my family's judgment, attempting to prove them wrong. Marcus demonstrated an alternative possibility, creating something so genuine that their opinions became meaningless. Within a year, I had transferred to Portland State University on a full scholarship. I kept working part-time at Marcus's software business, analyzing code and learning everything I could. "You're wasting your time doing grunt work," he informed me after I solved an issue that had puzzled their top developers for many weeks. "I'm moving you to the development team." The development team was made up of 7 persons, all of whom had computer science degrees from prominent colleges. I was the only community college transfer, and the only one who began coding after turning 26. The lone lady. Brandon Cole, my new boss, expressed his doubt early on. "Marcus loves to offer individuals opportunities," he told me after my first team meeting. "But this is professional grade work. If you can't keep up, speak out before bringing down the entire squad." I kept my lips shut and head down, allowing my job to speak for itself. When Brandon Cole gave me what he plainly felt was a tedious duty of documenting historical code that no one wanted to modify, I discovered 3 serious security flaws concealed in the ancient routines. Marcus summoned an emergency meeting after I submitted my report. If the weaknesses had been exploited by the wrong persons, the firm may have suffered catastrophic consequences. I not only discovered them, but also provided elegant solutions that would fill the gaps without disrupting existing functionality. Brandon Cole's expression as Marcus complimented my work in front of the entire business was almost worth the restless hours I'd spent searching over the code. "Good catch," Brandon Cole mumbled, unable to meet my gaze. "Just doing my job," I said evenly. But something had altered. The other developers began approaching me with questions, seeking my feedback on design decisions, and incorporating me in informal talks around the coffee machine. I was becoming a member of the team, gaining respect one challenge at a time. My social life, such as it was, consisted primarily of study groups and coworkers. I'd learned to be alone in my family, and that skill translated nicely into my newfound freedom. But there was a distinction between voluntary solitude and forced seclusion. Maya Collins, from my database management class, asked me to a party at her residence. I nearly declined. Parties were never my thing, but something made me accept. The meeting was tiny, about 14 persons, primarily computer science students. They discussed code and theory, and fought politely about the finest programming languages. For the first time in my life, I was in a room where I understood the topic and could make a significant contribution. You are the one who discovered those security flaws at Chen's firm, correct? I asked a man called Jordan Pierce. I learned about it through the internship network. Quite amazing. People were discussing my work. I was impressed with something I had done. The novelty of it made me nearly ecstatic. I began accepting more invites: coffee with Maya Collins, lunch with Kevin O'Connor, and happy hour with the development team. Building a social network from scratch was difficult and uncomfortable, but it was also mine, based on who I truly was, rather than who I was expected to be. My neighbor, Helen Gallagher, became an unexpected friend. She reminded me of what a mother could be: engaged, supporting, critical when needed, and always kind. She showed me how to prepare actual cuisine, not just ramen and pre-made meals. "You're too thin," she said, arriving at my home one Saturday with bags of food. "Come on, I'm showing you how to prepare lasagna." Her kitchen was warm and messy, the result of a long life. Photographs of children and grandkids adorned the refrigerator. Plants grew on every windowsill. She strolled around the area with ease, picking out pans and supplies and explaining each process. "Cooking is chemistry," she explained. "You understand coding. You can comprehend this." She was correct. Following a recipe was similar to following an algorithm: exact quantities, defined stages, and predictable results. I approached learning with the same zeal that I did everything else. While we waited for the lasagna to bake, Helen Gallagher commented that her granddaughter had gone to college to study computer technology. "She's doing quite well, works at a large firm in Silicon Valley. Are you close to her?" Helen Gallagher's countenance flashed with sadness. "Not as close as I would want. She's busy. I am elderly. That's life." "You are not old," I gently reminded her. "You are training me to prepare lasagna." She giggled and rubbed my hand. "Claire Bennett, you're fantastic for my ego. I'm delighted you moved next door." The statement struck a raw nerve in me. Someone was relieved I existed in their space. It was such a simple thing, yet I had never experienced it before. The lasagna came out nicely. Helen Gallagher sent me home with half of it and promised to make bread from scratch the next week. My parents phoned a couple times that first year. I changed my phone number, yet they continued to seek for my new contact information. I never responded, allowing their increasingly irate voicemails to pile up before deleting them in batches. Then, around 16 months after I went to Portland, Mom caught me in a moment of weakness. I had recently completed a difficult exam and was not paying attention when I answered an unfamiliar number. Her voice on the other end was strained with rage. "Scarlett writes to us about how bad jail is. She cries every day. She's experiencing panic attacks. The other convicts are abusive to her. And you continue to live your life as if nothing had occurred. She hit someone with her car and left them to die on the street." I answered gently, my voice cold and professional. "Mrs. Evelyn Parker spent 3 months in the hospital. She still cannot walk without assistance. Please tell me more about Scarlett's jail experience. You could have avoided all of this." Mom's voice crackled. "One modest sacrifice. That is all we requested. You wanted me to go to prison for a crime that I did not commit. You said I was trashy, unattractive, and useless in comparison to her. You wanted me to throw away my life because you believed hers was more valuable." My voice stayed firm and steadfast. "So I made a decision too. I picked myself. You are not the girl I raised. Good. Your daughter was miserable." I hung up and blocked the number. That was 3 years ago, and I have not communicated with them since. 2 months ago, I received a message on LinkedIn from James Callahan. The name seemed familiar, but I couldn't place it. Then I remembered Scarlett's fiancé, James, with whom she had purportedly planned a future. His message was brief. "I hope this gets to you. I know we have never met. I wanted you to know that I ended my engagement to your sister around 7 months after her conviction. Your parents informed her you'd been lying about what happened that night and had sabotaged her out of envy. I want you to know that I never believed them. I contacted Mrs. Evelyn Parker's family and learned the facts. I apologize for everything you went through. You did the correct thing." I gazed at the message for a long time. The vindication felt remote, like if it happened to someone else. I'd stopped seeking their approval years before, but I reacted nevertheless. "Thank you for contacting out. I hope you are well." His reply arrived an hour later. "I married somebody else 2 years ago. She is a public defender. Works with humans. The system fails. Meeting her helped me understand why you took that decision. Some things are more important than familial loyalty." I grinned at that. A stranger's husband understood me more than my own parents ever did. The years in Portland changed me in ways that I'm still finding. After struggling through community college, I transferred to Portland State and graduated summa cum laude with a degree in computer science. The lady who had just from high school finished university with a 3.8 GPA of 3.8 and employment offers from 3 separate firms. I decided to stay with Marcus Grant. Loyalty was important to me, and he gave me a chance when I was nobody. 2 years after graduation, I was promoted to lead developer at Marcus's firm, which had evolved from a scrappy startup to a real contender in the cybersecurity industry. My income had already reached 6 digits. I bought a tiny house in a quiet area with a garden that I was learning to tend. Tomatoes were supposedly more difficult to cultivate than code. My neighbor, Helen Gallagher, a retired teacher, handed me flower garden cuttings and told me about composting. She knew nothing about my family, Scarlett, jail, or the decision I had taken. To her, I was simply Claire Bennett, the quiet young woman next door who occasionally needed help identifying weeds. "You have good instincts," she told me one Saturday morning while we worked in my garden. "This soil was completely depleted when you bought the place. Look at it now." I examined the dark, rich dirt streaming between my fingertips. Something that had died was brought back to life via careful work. The metaphor was not lost on me. Scarlett was freed on parole last week. She had completed 4 years of her 5-year term with credit for good behavior. I knew because she had somehow discovered my email address and sent me a message. The subject line said, "We need to talk." The email itself was lengthy and meandering, alternating between fury and self-pity. She had lost her invitation to graduate school. James had abandoned her. She had a criminal record, making work practically difficult. Our parents had spent their retirement funds on legal expenses and appeals. And somehow, it was all my fault. "You ruined my life because you were jealous," she wrote. "You constantly resented the fact that I was prettier, smarter, and more accomplished. You saw one opportunity to tear me down and grabbed it. I made an error. People make errors, but you had a choice. You decided to be nasty." I read it 3 times, waiting for an emotion to develop. Anger, guilt, satisfaction, or anything. But there remained only a faint recollection of who she had always been, and who I had ultimately ceased being. I carefully wrote my response. "Scarlett, you were driving intoxicated. You struck a 66-year-old woman in the crosswalk and drove away as she lay bleeding on the pavement. Mrs. Evelyn Parker survived, but she will never fully recover. She had to relearn how to walk. She is still in chronic pain, and her medical bills have bankrupted her family's savings. Our parents asked me to go to prison for your crime, telling me that I was worthless, ugly, and that my life was less important than yours. They asked me to give up my freedom so you could keep your opportunities, but I refused. That is the extent of my crime against you. You believe you deserve special treatment because your parents spent your entire life telling you that you were exceptional, but you're not. You're just someone who made a bad decision and had to pay for it. I sincerely hope you rebuild your life, but you'll have to do it the same way I did mine, through hard work, accountability, and the understanding that no one owes you anything just because you want it. I will not answer to any future emails. I wish you the best, but I am no longer a part of your life." I emailed it and then quickly banned her email address. Then I disabled my parents' emails, cutting off the final thread that connected us. The relief was profound. 3 days ago I received a letter in certified mail. Although there was no return address, the postmark indicated that it came from Ohio. Inside was a handwritten message from my father. "Claire Bennett, your mother is quite unwell. The doctors think she does not have much time left. She is begging for you. Whatever your complaints are with this family, she is still your mother. She reared you, nourished you, and provided you with a home. You owe her at least one visit. Put aside your pride, and do the right thing. Dad." I held the letter for a long time, sitting on my porch swing as the dusk light faded over my garden. Helen Gallagher was watering her flowers next door, singing something tuneless but happy. The dying woman was not my mother in any manner that counted. She ceased being that the minute she looked at me coldly and decided I was disposable. Our biological tie was only a genetic fluke, no more substantial than having a blood type with a stranger. I considered the mother I wished to have. The one who would have safeguarded both of her children, who would have had Scarlett face her penalties while still giving love and support, and who saw value in both of us. That mother had not existed. I had finally accepted the reality. I walked inside and wrote a quick answer. "Dad, I hope Mom receives the care she requires. I will not be visiting. Claire Bennett. I sent it the next morning. 4 weeks later, another certified letter arrived. I knew exactly what it would say before I opened it. The funeral notification was simple and conventional. My mother passed away. Services would be conducted in the church where I was christened as an infant, which I hadn't visited in almost a decade. I was recorded as a survivor, as if I had been present in her life. I placed the notification into the recycling bin and went to work. Yesterday, Marcus Grant summoned me to his office. I was working on a significant security contract that had the potential to propel the organization to new heights. My work was precise, identifying difficulties before they arose and fixing them with beautiful efficiency. Marcus Grant smiled as he continued. The client was impressed. They want you to lead the implementation team. It's a promotion, a large raise, and your own department. We spoke about the specifics for an hour. This role would make me one of the company's youngest department heads. The salary was ludicrous, something I'd never considered applying to my life. I accepted on the moment. Walking back to my car, I contacted Dr. Allison Walsh. She'd become a friend over the years, and I checked in with her quarterly to report my progress and ask advice. I informed her I received the promotion. Her pleased giggle filled the phone. I knew you would. You have earned it 1,000 times over. She paused. I kept thinking about our first encounter in your office. When you told me I had aptitude. You did. You do. She continued, her voice becoming quieter. I've seen many pupils pass through my programs. Very few of them possess your brains and determination. But I have observed something. The people that accomplish the most are frequently those who have something to prove. You had more to prove than most. I don't anymore, I realized as I spoke it aloud for the first time. I'm not trying to prove them wrong anymore. I'm simply living. That's when you've truly won, Dr. Allison Walsh replied softly. We spoke for a little longer before saying goodbye. I drove home through Portland's nighttime traffic, seeing the city lights turn on against the darker sky. My phone was buzzing with texts from coworkers congratulating me. Plans for a celebratory supper were already underway. I thought of Scarlett in Ohio, freshly freed and presumably trying to find work because of her record, living with our father in the house where we grew up. Mom had passed away 4 weeks ago, and she was buried without my presence. I imagined Dad alone with the daughter he attempted to save and the one he'd discarded, and all I felt was a distant optimism that they'd ultimately come to terms with their decisions, just as I had. My house gleamed warmly as I pulled into the driveway. Helen Gallagher waved from her porch, saying something about bringing zucchini bread tomorrow. Inside, my home office was filled with proof of my actual life. Framed degrees, job awards, and photos of coworkers who had become friends. There are no family photographs. I stopped exhibiting them years ago. I prepared dinner and worked in my garden till the light went out entirely. The tomatoes were finally flourishing, laden with fruit that would mature in the following weeks. I'd learnt patience with them, seeing that progress could not be pushed, but rather encouraged and given time. My phone vibrated one last time. An email sent from an unknown address. I nearly deleted it before reading it, but something compelled me to open it. Miss Claire Bennett, my name is Natalie Parker. My mother was the victim of the hit and run that involved your sister. I wanted to reach out since my mother had requested me to contact you. She read about your sister's release in the press and wanted to tell you something. She wants you to know that she has forgiven your sister for what transpired. But more than that, she wanted me to tell you that your story, your honesty about what occurred that night, restored her trust in humans. She had been suffering with wrath and resentment, believing that justice did not exist. Learning that someone had chosen truth above familial loyalty, even at tremendous personal sacrifice, aided her recovery in ways that medicine could not. My mother is now 74. She is still in pain and needs a cane, but she is at peace with it. She wanted you to know that your choice was important to her and that it helped. Thank you for your integrity. Sincerely, Natalie Parker. I read it 3 times. Tears obscured the words and surprised me with their ferocity. I hadn't sobbed about anything in years, but these weren't tears of sorrow or rage. They represented something cleaner, almost like finality. I wrote back. Dear Natalie, please tell your mother that her note meant more than she knows. I hope she continues to heal. I hope she has many happy years ahead. Thank you for contacting out. With thanks, Claire Bennett. I submitted it and shut my laptop. The home was calm around me, full of the life I had created from nothing. There is no family legacy, no parental support, and no sister's shadow to live in. Just my own work, my own decisions, and my steadfast reluctance to accept their interpretation of who I was meant to be. I moved through my house, shutting out lights and closing doors in preparation for sleep. In my bedroom, I saw my reflection in the mirror. The face staring back was not awful. It had never been unattractive. It was all mine, lived in and earned, with challenges my family would never comprehend since they hadn't bothered to witness them. Tomorrow I'd go to work and begin establishing my new department. I'd hire people who shown promise in the same way Marcus Grant and Dr. Allison Walsh saw it in me. I'd make something worthwhile with nothing but labor and vision. My phone was now quiet. There are no more letters from Ohio. No more guilt trips or manipulations. My mother was killed and buried without my tears. My father had reclaimed Scarlett, the daughter he had chosen. They could rebuild any connection they wanted without my interfering. Helen Gallagher's zucchini bread might appear at some time. Work would be difficult and fulfilling. My garden would require maintenance. My existence would continue, constructed on my own foundations and nourished by the effort I decided to make. They wanted me to give up everything for Scarlett because they believed I was worth less. Instead, I walked away and realized how much I was worth when assessed by my own standards rather than theirs. The math worked out better than they could have dreamed. I got into bed and slept peacefully, dreamlessly, like someone who had finally let go of a burden she was never meant to bear. Tomorrow would bring new problems, new wins, and new proof that the person they'd discarded was precisely the person who ought to be retained. And that, I thought as I went off to sleep, was the finest justice of all. Call to action. I hope my tale touched some of you. It has been a long road, and it is still ongoing. I would love to hear your opinions. Have you ever had to choose yourself above your family's expectations, or leave a relationship that was holding you back? Tell me what you think in the comments section. I genuinely want to know. After Dad's $4,800,000 estate opened, my blood sugar hit 658. My brother filmed instead of helping. 3 weeks later, labs proved he'd swapped my insulin with saline. I awoke on the restroom floor at 2:47 a.m. Paramedics strapped an oxygen mask on my face, while my brother stood in the doorway recording with his phone. Not helpful. Filming. My blood sugar level was 658. The usual range is 70 to 110. At 6:30 you begin to get diabetic ketoacidosis. At 760, you die. The lead paramedic continued asking when I had last taken my insulin, and I kept telling him 3 hours ago, right before bed, as I had done every night for the preceding 12 years. He gazed at my brother. My brother looked at his phone, and something about that interchange chilled my skin in a way that had nothing to do with the medical crisis actually killing me. The estate struggle began 7 weeks earlier, when our father died of a fatal heart attack at the age of 65, leaving behind a commercial real estate portfolio valued around $4.8 million. My father will share everything 50-50 between me and my brother Caleb. Simple, clean, and fair. Except Caleb had been Dad's business partner for the previous 9 years, while I had been teaching high school chemistry 3 states away. Caleb had access to all of the funds, assets, and papers. He'd been residing at Dad's house since the funeral, purportedly preparing things for probate. I drove down from Michigan to our hometown of Columbus, Ohio, 12 days after Dad died to remain at his house throughout the estate settlement. That's when my diabetes started acting up. I am 35 years old. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 24, shortly after graduating from college. It's been a part of my daily routine for more than 10 years. I understand my body. I recognize the warning signals of high blood sugar, extreme thirst, frequent urination, impaired vision and exhaustion. I understand how excellent control feels against negative control. And I'd had great control for years. My latest A1C test, 4 months before Dad died, was 6.1, which is practically ideal for a diabetic. My endocrinologist, Dr. Michael S. Carter from Ann Arbor Medical Center, genuinely praised me at my previous checkup. So, when I began having hypoglycemic symptoms while taking my insulin on a regular basis, I blamed it on stress. Grief causes unexpected changes in your body. Cortisol levels increase. Sleep habits become interrupted. Food habits change. It seemed reasonable that my blood sugar would be more difficult to regulate. Except, it wasn't only more difficult to control. It was totally uncontrolled. Before injecting long-acting insulin at night, I would check my blood sugar. Let us pretend it was 135. Slightly high but doable. I would inject my customary dose of 36 units, which I had been taking for 2 years. Then I'd check again in the morning, anticipating it to be anywhere between 90 and 110. Instead, it would read 380, 420, or 511. I hadn't seen these numbers since I was initially diagnosed and had no idea how to control the condition. Numbers that didn't make sense considering my insulin regimen. I began monitoring my blood sugar every 2 hours and even set alarms to wake up during the night. The trend was constant and disturbing. My insulin simply wasn't functioning. I phoned Dr. Carter's office on a Thursday morning after a particularly horrible night in which my blood sugar reached 512. I spoke with Lauren Hayes, his nurse practitioner who had been overseeing my treatment for the previous 20 months. She asked all the appropriate questions. Have I modified my diet? No. Was I unwell from an infection? No. Was I experiencing extraordinary stress? Well, yeah. My father had recently died and I was dealing with his inheritance. She indicated that stress hormones might definitely develop insulin resistance, making my regular dosages less effective. She upped my overnight long-acting dose from 36 to 44 units and instructed me to call back in 4 days if things did not improve. They did not improve. They became worse. Caleb was quite helpful throughout this time. He saw I wasn't feeling well and kept asking if he could help. He'd bring me bottles of water whenever I mentioned being thirsty. He'd offer to prepare dinner so that I could relax. He'd ask about my blood sugar levels and shake his head compassionately when I informed him they were high. One night, he sat with me in the kitchen while I prepared my injection. Is it scary? He inquired, observing me draw insulin from the container into the syringe. Knowing you must do this every day or you will die. I advised him to get accustomed to it. You don't fully consider the stakes anymore. It becomes routine, much like cleaning your teeth. He nodded slowly and looked at the vial of insulin on the counter. Where do you keep it? In the fridge. I informed him. Yes, in the door of the upstairs bathroom fridge, the small one Dad installed when Mom was sick. Caleb was aware that he had previously lived in this house, but he inquired nevertheless. The estate lawyer, Thomas Whitaker of Whitaker and Associates, planned our first official meeting for Monday morning, 4 weeks after I arrived. I was feeling really bad by that moment. The persistently elevated blood sugar was creating a variety of secondary symptoms. Constant exhaustion, difficulties concentration, and blurry eyesight made reading texts uncomfortable. Frequent visits to the restroom disrupted the conference several times. Whitaker often paused his explanation of the probate procedure to ask if I wanted a break. I continued apologizing and explaining that I was all right, just struggling with some health concerns. Caleb sat across the meeting table, hands folded, appearing worried and patient. Maybe we should reschedule, he said after my third restroom trip. You clearly aren't feeling well. Whitaker agreed that it could be best. We rescheduled on the following Monday. I left the meeting feeling ashamed and irritated. I had seemed incompetent in front of our father's lawyer. Worse, I had appeared unstable, as if I couldn't handle fundamental adult obligations. That evening I upped my insulin dosage without first phoning Dr. Carter's office. I took 58 units rather than 44. It was foolish and even hazardous to take such a large jump without medical supervision, but I was desperate. I needed to get my blood sugar under control before our next appointment with Whitaker. I couldn't afford to appear distraught during the estate processes. My blood sugar level before bedtime was 371. The following morning, it was 552. I had taken 58 units of long-acting insulin, and my blood sugar had risen by 181 points. That isn't how insulin works. That is not how any of this works. Something wasn't right with me. Something outside stress, bereavement, or insulin resistance. I scheduled an appointment with a local endocrinologist, Dr. Allison Grant, at Columbus Diabetes Associates, and was seen 2 days later after stressing the situation was an emergency. Dr. Grant was in her late 40s, with gray-streaked hair and the calm, analytical manner of a specialist dealing with a medical emergency. She looked at my blood sugar logs, insulin dosage data, and a recent A1C test from Michigan. Then she examined me, looking for evidence of lipohypertrophy, a kind of scar tissue that might interfere with insulin absorption. Everything seemed perfect. She ordered a full blood workup, which included a C-peptide test to assess my pancreatic function, a hormone imbalance screening, and an insulin antibody test. I'm going to be honest with you, she added, removing her exam gloves. The presentation does not make physiological sense. You should respond to these insulin dosages. We need to find out why you aren't. The blood test was returned within 36 hours. Everything was usual. My pancreas was not making insulin, as predicted for type 1 diabetes. My thyroid function was fine. There is no illness, no hormonal imbalance, and no insulin antibodies. Dr. Grant phoned me personally to explain the findings. I want you to come back in and bring your insulin vials, she told me. All of them, including the ones you're using now and any backups you have. I'd like to test them. I asked her what she felt was wrong. There was a lengthy delay on the line. I don't want to speculate until we rule out environmental factors, she explained cautiously. However, if your insulin is incorrectly maintained or contaminated, this might explain why it isn't working. Can you come tomorrow morning? I said yes. I grabbed all of my insulin vials that evening. I had 3. The one I was using from the bathroom fridge, a backup in the same fridge, and an unopened one in my luggage case from Michigan. I arranged them on my dresser to bring to Dr. Grant in the morning. Then I headed downstairs to prepare dinner. Caleb was in the kitchen, staring at his phone. Are you okay? He inquired, looking up. You've seemed stressed lately. I assured him I was all right, but annoyed with my blood sugar concerns. He nodded compassionately. So, let me know if there's anything I can do to assist. We are in this together, right? Dad would have wanted us to take care of one another. I thanked him and reheated the leftovers. After supper, I returned upstairs to prepare my nightly injection. When I reached for the vials on my dresser, the backup vial was in a different location than I had placed it. Not much altered, but slightly displaced, about an inch to the left, something you may miss if you weren't paying attention. My hands became shaky. I told myself I was too paranoid. I persuaded myself that the stress of Dad's death, the estate processes, and my medical concerns were causing me to perceive conspiracies where none existed. I assured myself Caleb wouldn't do that. He was my brother. We had grown up together. We had shared a room until I went to college. He'd been there when I was initially diagnosed with diabetes, teaching me how to administer injections and monitor my blood sugar levels. He phoned me every few months to see how I was doing and whether my diabetes was under control. He cared for me. But I also recall what Dad had stated approximately a year before his death. During one of our phone discussions, he said that Caleb had been pressing for a change in the business structure that would make Caleb the major owner and Dad a silent partner. Dad had refused. I built this company, he had stated. I'm not signing it away while I'm still alive and capable. Caleb had been furious with the choice. Very furious. I did not take my insulin that night. Instead, I visited a 24-hour pharmacy and purchased 3 fresh vials with my insurance. They were pricey, at $110 each, even with insurance. But I had to know. I needed to exclude the idea that something was amiss with my existing supply. I took my nightly dosage with one of the brand new drugstore vials. My blood sugar level before the injection was 382. When I woke up the next morning and tested again, it was 109, which is normal, healthy, and exactly where it should be. After an appropriate dosage of long-acting insulin, I sat on the side of my bed, looking at the glucose meter display, feeling chilly all over my body. The insulin from the pharmacist worked. The insulin from my bathroom fridge did not work, indicating that my medicine had been tampered with. I phoned Dr. Grant and informed her that I had found out the problem. She questioned what I meant. I described buying fresh insulin at the pharmacy and receiving a normal result for the first time in weeks. She paused for a bit before saying, "Bring in all of your old vials today if possible. I'm going to have them evaluated by our lab and file a report with the Ohio Board of Pharmacy. If your medicine was tampered with, this is a serious offense." I agreed to come in within an hour. Then I went to the bathroom fridge and got the vials. The current one I was using was still there. The backup vial was gone. I had noticed it the night before on my dresser. It wasn't in either the bathroom or my bedroom. I looked for 25 minutes before acknowledging the apparent reality. Someone had snatched it. Someone who realized I was growing suspicious. Someone gained access to the house and my stuff. Someone who was my brother. I drove to Dr. Grant's office with the 2 leftover vials. The one I was currently using, and the unopened one from my Michigan travel case. Dr. Grant greeted me in an exam room with a worried expression that made her appear older than she did at our initial session. She gave over the vials to a lab worker who photographed them and filled out chain of custody documents. "These will go to Ohio State's Medical Forensics Lab," Dr. Grant added. "They may evaluate the contents to see whether there has been any replacement or contamination. The procedure takes around 4 to 6 business days. I asked her what she believed had happened. She selected her words carefully. In my 17 years of practicing endocrinology, I've encountered 3 instances of pharmaceutical manipulation. Both included family members with financial incentives. I cannot make allegations, but anybody with access to your insulin might readily replace it with saline solution or another transparent liquid. The vials appear identical. Without advanced testing, you'd never know. I did not return to Dad's place that night. I got into a downtown hotel and paid with cash since I didn't want Caleb to be able to monitor my credit card. I sat in my hotel room, reflecting on everything that had transpired during the previous 4 weeks. My blood sugar difficulties began shortly after I arrived at the residence. Caleb's remarkable care, giving me water, inquiring about my diabetes control, seeing me prepare injections, and his query about where I kept my insulin, which he already knew but asked nevertheless. At the rescheduled estate conference, I appeared incompetent and unstable, just the type of person whose judgment could be challenged in probate court. The missing backup vial from the night made me suspect. And at the heart of it all, there's the money. $4.8 million shared between 2 brothers, unless one brother is judged unable to manage his inheritance. I contacted the Columbus Police non-emergency number and requested to talk with someone about a possible attempted murder. The dispatcher connected me with Detective Marcus Reed of the Major Crimes Unit. Reed had worked with CPD for 21 years, according to the brief history he provided me when we met at the station the next morning. He was in his mid-40s, with graying hair and sad eyes from witnessing too many betrayals inside his family. I told him everything. Dad's death, the multi-million-dollar inheritance, my odd blood sugar issue, the insulin that stopped functioning, the lost backup vial, and the drugstore insulin that worked wonderfully. Reed listened without interrupting and took notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, he put down his pen and stared directly at me. "Do you still have access to your father's home?" he asked. I said, "Yes, I still had my key." "Don't go back there alone," Reed said. "If what you're saying is correct, your brother tried to murder you. The fact that he's photographing your medical emergency shows that he's documenting your alleged instability for legal reasons. This was deliberate. This is sophisticated. This is someone who has planned every step." Detective Reed directed Officer Nolan Park to accompany me back to the residence to grab my possessions and any evidence. Park was younger, perhaps in his early 30s, with an intense focus that made you feel both safe and little apprehensive. We got at the house about 10:30 a.m. on a Friday. Caleb's automobile was gone. I let us in with my key and immediately went upstairs to the bathroom. The insulin vial I had been using was still inside the refrigerator door. Park shot it in place before carefully bagging it as evidence, using a body camera to film the entire process. Next, we searched my bedroom. Park discovered an empty insulin bottle in the trash bin next to my dresser, buried among crumpled papers and tissues. Not one of mine, but an extra vial mistakenly dumped by someone who assumed it would be disposed of with the ordinary trash. Park also grabbed that. We then searched Caleb's room. I felt bad about it. Invasive, as if I was breaking some basic trust between brothers. However, Park was thorough and professional, inspecting drawers and closets with trained skill. In Caleb's bedside table, below a stack of financial paperwork pertaining to Dad's estate, Park found a box of saline solution vials, the sort used for wound irrigation or medical treatments. If you don't look closely at the label, it appears precisely like insulin. Park held up the box without touching it directly, using a pen to flip up the top. 2 vials were missing from the original box of 10. Park shot everything from numerous angles, then bagged the entire package. "We'll test these against your insulin vials," he added. "If the contents match, we have physical evidence of substitution. Combined with the medical paperwork from your doctor, this creates a prosecutable case." We were placing the evidence into Park's patrol cruiser when Caleb's vehicle came into the driveway. He climbed out slowly, glancing between me, the uniformed officer, and the evidence bags with an expression that cycled through perplexity, concern, and something more. Something calculated. "What's going on?" he asked, directing the question at me rather than Park. "Is everything okay? Did anything happen?" I did not say anything. Park went forward with his badge displayed. "I'm Officer Nolan Park with Columbus PD. We're collecting evidence related to an ongoing investigation. Do you live at this residence?" Caleb nodded, his gaze never leaving my face. "This is my father's house. My brother and I are both residing here while we settle the estate. What investigation? What evidence?" Park didn't answer. Instead, he requested Caleb to move aside as we completed loading the van. Caleb obeyed, but I could see his mind working, trying to figure out what I knew and what I might show. Detective Marcus Reed phoned me that evening with preliminary results from Ohio State's medical forensics lab. They'd fast-tracked the analysis given the attempted murder claims. The vial you were actively using, Reed continued, contains approximately 80% saline solution and 20% insulin. Not enough insulin to be medically useful, but enough that you wouldn't quickly know something was wrong. The saline dilution explains why your blood sugar kept increasing after taking what you believed were enough doses. The unopened vial from your travel case is pure insulin, no tampering, and the empty vial we found in your trash matches the saline solution boxes in your brother's room. Same manufacturer, same batch number. I inquired what occurred next. Now we build the case, Reed remarked. We have physical evidence, medical documentation, and opportunity. What we need is motivation testimony, and any proof proving your brother's financial interest in you, seeming incompetent. I called Thomas Whitaker, the estate attorney, and demanded copies of every correspondence between him and Caleb over the preceding 7 weeks. Whitaker was professionally reluctant, until I indicated there was a current police investigation into alleged estate fraud and attempted murder. That changed his tone dramatically. He sent over the emails within 2 hours. There were 41 messages total. Most were standard queries regarding probate processes and property appraisals, but 6 communications sent over the period of 12 days voiced worries about my abilities to manage my inheritance. The first email was sent 4 days after I arrived at the residence. I'm worried about my brother's health. He appears highly unorganized and is having problems controlling his diabetes. Is there a method for medical examination if one successor looks unable to perform financial responsibilities? The second email followed 6 days later. My brother had to leave our meeting multiple times due to health issues and seemed confused about basic estate details. I want to make sure he's safeguarded, even if it requires greater oversight of his portion. The cycle continued, each communication meticulously documenting my seeming deterioration, while posing Caleb as the worried responsible sibling seeking to safeguard both of us. Dr. Grant provided a comprehensive medical report detailing my 12-year history of excellent diabetes management, my recent unexplained hypoglycemic crisis, and the immediate normalization of my blood sugar once I switched to uncompromised insulin. Based on the patient's medical history and the laboratory confirmation of insulin tampering, she wrote in her conclusion, "It is my professional opinion that the patient's hypoglycemic episodes were iatrogenically induced through intentional medication substitution. Without intervention, the patient would have progressed to diabetic ketoacidosis, coma, and likely death within days to weeks." She attached my blood sugar logs, showing the dramatic contrast between the 4 weeks of using tampered insulin and the immediate improvement with pharmacy insulin. The documentation was devastating and indisputable. Detective Reed brought Caleb in for questioning on a Monday morning, exactly 5 weeks after the paramedics had found me unconscious on the bathroom floor. I wasn't present for the interview, but Reed recorded everything and played portions back for me later. Caleb maintained his innocence throughout, claiming he had no idea how saline solution ended up in his bedside table, suggesting maybe I'd planted it there to frame him out of grief-induced paranoia. He said he'd been nothing but supportive during my health crisis, that his emails to the estate attorney were genuine expressions of concern, not attempts to undermine my competency. When Reed presented him with the test proof confirming the insulin had been tampered with, Caleb argued maybe the pharmacy had made a mistake, or maybe my diabetes had merely moved to a more severe level. His explanations grew increasingly desperate and contradictory as the interview continued. The breakthrough came when Reed asked Caleb about the video footage, the footage from my medical emergency, which Caleb had filmed on his phone instead of helping. "Why were you recording your brother during a medical crisis?" Reed asked. There was a long silence on the recording. Then Caleb said something that destroyed any remaining pretense of innocence. "I needed documentation for the estate proceedings to show he wasn't capable of managing his portion." Reed asked him to clarify. "Documentation of what specifically?" Another pause. "Of his mental state, his instability." The lawyer said it would be helpful if there were concerns about competency. Reed pressed further. "So you were documenting your brother's medical emergencies to use against him in a state court, and you saw no reason to help him instead?" Caleb realized his mistake too late. He tried to backtrack, claiming he'd called 911 first before recording, that he'd only filmed for a few seconds, but the damage was done. He'd admitted to documenting my crisis for legal advantage rather than providing help. The Ohio prosecutor's office filed charges 4 days later. Attempted murder, assault with a deadly weapon, the tampered insulin qualified as a weapon under Ohio law, and estate fraud. The prosecutor, Madeline Pierce, had spent 14 years in major crimes and had a reputation for being thorough and merciless with white-collar criminals who hurt family members. She scheduled a preliminary hearing for 12 days out. In the meantime, Detective Reed executed a search warrant for all of Caleb's electronic devices, his phone, laptop, tablet, and cloud storage accounts. The digital forensics team found things that made the case even worse. Caleb had researched insulin tampering methods 4 weeks before Dad died. He'd visited forums discussing how to induce diabetic crises without being detected. He'd researched estate competency laws and medical conservatorship procedures. He'd even calculated how long it would take for sustained hypoglycemia to cause permanent organ damage or death. Every search, every calculation, every research query had been saved in his browser history like a roadmap of premeditated attempted murder. But the most damaging evidence came from Caleb's text messages with his girlfriend, someone named Rebecca Dalton, who worked in medical billing at a local hospital. The messages went back 7 months to before Dad's death. In them, Caleb complained about having to share the estate 1/2 to 1/2 when he'd done all the work building Dad's business. He wrote things like, "Why should he get half when he's been gone for years, and there has to be a way to contest the will." Rebecca had apparently suggested using my diabetes against me. "Doesn't he have to take insulin every day? What if something happened with that? Like if he seemed really sick or unstable?" Caleb's response: "That's genius. If he can't manage his own health, how can he manage millions of dollars?" The text chain continued over weeks, with Rebecca providing information about insulin storage and effectiveness, Caleb planning when to make the switch, and both of them discussing how to document my decline for legal purposes. The preliminary hearing was brief and brutal. Prosecutor Pierce presented the physical evidence, the medical documentation, the text messages, and the search history. Caleb's attorney, a public defender named Daniel Mercer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable as the evidence mounted, argued that the case was circumstantial, that the text messages were taken out of context, that Caleb's research could have been motivated by genuine concern for my health. Judge Evelyn Hart, who'd been on the bench for 24 years and had presided over some of Ohio's most notorious family crime cases, wasn't buying it. "Counsel," she said, removing her glasses and addressing Mercer directly. "Your client researched how to make someone diabetic appear unstable, purchased the materials to tamper with medication, had access to the victim's medication storage, exchanged texts, planning this exact scenario, and filmed the resulting medical crisis instead of providing aid. At what point does this stop being circumstantial and start being a clear pattern of intentional harm?" She bound Caleb over for trial with bail set at $600,000. He couldn't make bail. He stayed in county lockup, awaiting trial. The estate proceedings took a different turn after the charges were filed. Thomas Whitaker filed a motion to pause probate pending the outcome of the criminal trial. Ohio has a slayer statute that prevents criminals from inheriting from their victims. And while Dad's death itself was natural causes, the argument was that Caleb's attempt to murder me for my inheritance disqualified him from benefiting from Dad's estate. Judge Hart agreed to pause the proceedings until the criminal case concluded. In the meantime, the court appointed a neutral third-party administrator to manage Dad's properties and accounts. I was relieved. I didn't want the money anymore. I just wanted to understand how my brother, someone I'd grown up with and trusted completely, could look at me and see nothing but an obstacle to wealth. The trial took place 5 months after my near-death experience. The prosecution's case was methodical and overwhelming. Dr. Grant testified about the medical impossibility of my blood sugar crisis occurring naturally given my history. Dr. Carter, my Michigan endocrinologist, testified via video about my years of excellent control. The Ohio State forensic chemist testified about the insulin dilution and saline substitution. Detective Reed testified about finding the empty vial in my trash and the saline boxes in Caleb's room. Officer Park testified about the evidence collection. The digital forensic specialist testified about Caleb's research history and text messages. And I testified about watching my brother film me during a medical emergency instead of helping. About the missing backup insulin vial. About realizing someone I loved had spent weeks systematically poisoning me. Caleb's defense was weak and desperate. Attorney Mercer tried to argue that Rebecca Dalton had been the mastermind. That she'd manipulated Caleb into this scheme. That he'd just been going along with her suggestions without really understanding the consequences. The jury didn't buy it. Caleb was 37 years old, a successful businessman who'd co-managed a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio. He wasn't some naive victim led astray by a girlfriend. The text messages showed him actively planning, researching, and executing the medication tampering. Rebecca was charged separately as an accomplice and took a plea deal, agreeing to testify against Caleb in exchange for a reduced sentence. Her testimony was devastating. She described how Caleb had asked her for advice about making someone look medically unreliable. How he'd specifically mentioned my diabetes as a vulnerability. How he'd laughed about me getting sicker while he documented everything for the estate case. The jury deliberated for under 2 hours. Guilty on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree. Assault with a deadly weapon. Estate fraud. Judge Evelyn Hart scheduled sentencing for 12 days later. When that day came, she delivered a statement that I'll remember for the rest of my life. "Mr. Parker," she said, addressing Caleb directly as he stood in his orange jumpsuit and restraints. "You looked at your brother and saw only money. You took his trust, his love, and his medical vulnerability and weaponized them in service of greed. You researched how to kill him slowly enough that it would look like natural causes or medical mismanagement. You documented his suffering not to help, but to use against him. You stole weeks of his life and nearly stole all of it. This court finds your actions to be among the most callous and calculated it has encountered." She sentenced him to 21 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for the first 14. Rebecca Dalton got 6 years for conspiracy and accomplice to attempted murder. The estate proceedings resumed after the conviction. Under Ohio's Slayer statute, Caleb was disqualified from inheriting anything from Dad's estate. His entire one-half share reverted to me, by default. I inherited everything. The properties, the business, the bank accounts, all $4.8 million, plus the appreciation that had occurred during the 9 months of legal proceedings. Thomas Whitaker handled the final transfer with professional efficiency. When he handed me the last document to sign, he said something that struck me as both true and terrible. "Your father built this legacy to provide for both his sons. It must break his heart, wherever he is, to know one son tried to murder the other for it." I signed the papers and walked out of Whitaker's office as the sole heir to everything Dad had worked for, and all I felt was empty. I moved back to Michigan 12 days later. I couldn't stay in Columbus. Couldn't live in Dad's house where my brother had spent weeks slowly poisoning me while I slept down the hall. I sold the house and most of the properties, keeping only 3 small commercial buildings that generated steady rental income. The money went into trust accounts managed by financial advisors I'd never met, people with no connection to my family or our history. I didn't want to think about it, didn't want to manage it, didn't want the wealth that had almost killed me. I went back to teaching high school chemistry. My students had no idea what I'd been through. They just knew me as Mr. Parker, the teacher who sometimes used diabetes management as an example when teaching about biochemistry and molecular interactions. Dr. Carter recommended I see a therapist to process everything that had happened. I started seeing Dr. Sophia Ramirez, a trauma specialist in Ann Arbor, who'd worked with victims of family violence. The first few sessions were just me trying to articulate how it felt to realize my brother had watched me get sicker and done nothing, had actively made me sicker, had filmed my near-death experience like it was content for his legal case. Dr. Ramirez helped me understand that betrayal trauma is different from other types of trauma because it destroys your baseline ability to trust. You have to rebuild your sense of safety from the ground up. She said, you have to learn that what happened with your brother was specific to him, not representative of all relationships or all family bonds. It took months before I could even begin to believe that. I still check my insulin obsessively. Every vial gets inspected before use. I bought a small safe for my medication, and I'm the only one with the combination. I test my blood sugar more frequently than necessary, paranoid that somehow the numbers will start climbing again, even though I know rationally that I'm using uncompromised insulin from sealed pharmacy containers. The trauma left marks that go beyond the physical. My current A1C is back to 6.3. Excellent control, according to Dr. Carter. But the psychological cost of what Caleb did can't be measured in blood glucose levels or hemoglobin markers. I visited Caleb in prison once, about 14 months after his conviction. I don't know why I went. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I needed to hear him explain how he justified it to himself. Maybe I needed to see him in that gray prison uniform and understand that justice had been served. We sat across from each other in the visitation room with a plexiglass barrier between us and phones connecting our voices. He looked older, smaller somehow, diminished by incarceration. I asked him why. Why had he done it? He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I convinced myself you didn't deserve it. Half of everything Dad built. You left, went to Michigan, became a teacher. I stayed here, worked with him every day, learned the business. In my mind, I'd earned it all, and you'd earned nothing. The money became more important than you being alive." I don't know when that happened, but it did. I asked if he was sorry. He nodded. Every single day. But that doesn't change anything, does it? I told him. No, it didn't. Then I hung up the phone and left. I haven't been back. The weird thing about surviving attempted murder by a family member is that people don't know how to talk to you about it. They offer condolences like you've lost someone to natural causes. They say things like, "At least he's in prison now," as if incarceration equals healing. They avoid asking questions because they don't want to be intrusive. So you end up carrying the story alone. My colleagues at the high school know what happened. It made local news in Michigan too. But no one mentions it. I'm just the chemistry teacher who takes insulin before lunch and sometimes zones out during faculty meetings because I'm remembering what it felt like to wake up with paramedics strapping a mask to my face while my brother stood in the doorway filming. Dr. Ramirez says, "I'm making progress. I've started dating again cautiously and with significant trust issues that I'm upfront about from the start. I've reconnected with friends I'd pulled away from during the estate proceedings. I've established new routines that feel safe and controllable. But there are still moments when the weight of everything crashes down, like when I'm preparing my nighttime injection and I have a flash of panic wondering if the insulin is real. Or when I pass estate planning offices and remember sitting in Whitaker's conference room feeling like I was dying while my brother calmly documented my incompetence for legal advantage. Or when I see news stories about families torn apart by inheritance disputes, and I think about how Dad never could have imagined his estate would become my attempted murder weapon. The money from Dad's estate sits in accounts I rarely access. I live on my teacher's salary, about $68,000 a year, which is enough for a decent apartment and a reliable car, and the occasional weekend trip. The inheritance feels like blood money, tainted by what Caleb did to get it. But Dr. Ramirez reminds me that Dad wanted me to have it. That using it doesn't mean accepting what Caleb did. That I'm allowed to benefit from my father's legacy without carrying guilt for my brother's crimes. Rationally, I understand that. Emotionally, I'm still working on it. I've started using small amounts to fund diabetes research at the Ohio State Medical School, and to support programs teaching high school students about science and medicine. If Dad's money has to be part of my life, at least it can do some good. Sometimes I wonder if Caleb thinks about what he lost. Not the inheritance or the properties or the business partnership with Dad. Those are just money and assets. I wonder if he thinks about losing a brother. If he remembers the years before greed made me into a target instead of family. We used to be close, or I thought we were. We'd call each other every few months to catch up. We'd visit during holidays when our schedules aligned. He'd helped me through my diabetes diagnosis, learning about the disease alongside me so he could understand what I was dealing with. Or maybe that was research too. Maybe he was always calculating, always looking for advantages, always seeing relationships as transactions. I'll never know which memories were real and which were strategy. Judge Hart's words come back to me often. You looked at your brother and saw only money. That's what haunts me most. Not the physical danger, not even the betrayal itself, but the reduction of everything we'd been to each other down to a dollar amount. $2.4 million to be exact. That's what my half of the estate was worth. That's what Caleb decided was worth watching me die. The math is simple and horrifying. My life, my trust, our shared childhood, our father's love for both of us. All of it calculated and found less valuable than money. You can't come back from understanding that. You can't unknow that equation. I still have the glucometer reading from that first morning after using the pharmacy insulin. 109, normal, safe, proof that my body wasn't failing, that my diabetes hadn't suddenly become uncontrollable, that the crisis was manufactured. I kept the printout in a drawer for months, looking at it sometimes when I needed to remind myself that I wasn't crazy, that my suspicions had been justified, that the person who tried to kill me was actually imprisoned for it and not walking around free. Dr. Ramirez eventually suggested I let go of that printout, that holding on to physical evidence was keeping me stuck in survival mode when I needed to move toward recovery. I threw it away, but I still remember the number 109, the proof that saved my life. The criminal case made local news, but never went national. Ohio teachers didn't recognize my name or my story when I returned to Michigan. I was grateful for that anonymity. I could rebuild my life without carrying the label of that guy, whose brother tried to kill him for inheritance money. My students know me as someone who explains molecular bonds with enthusiasm and occasionally brings in donuts for the class. My neighbors know me as the quiet guy in Unit 4C who's pleasant in the elevator and always sorts his recycling correctly. My therapist knows the full story and a few close friends know the outline. But most of my world is built on normal interactions that have nothing to do with attempted murder or family betrayal or estate fraud. That normality is precious and a hard one. There are good days now. Days where I don't think about Caleb or the tampered insulin or the paramedics finding me on the bathroom floor. Days where my diabetes is just a manageable chronic condition rather than a weapon someone used against me. Days where I can enjoy teaching chemistry without the irony of explaining how molecules interact while remembering that someone used molecular manipulation to try to kill me. Those days are increasing in frequency, and Dr. Ramirez says that's the definition of healing. Not forgetting what happened, but reducing how much space it takes up in your daily existence. I'm working on that. Some days are easier than others. I keep Dad's watch, the one Mom gave him on their 20th anniversary. Caleb hadn't wanted it during the estate division because it wasn't worth much monetarily. Just a regular Seiko with a leather band worn from years of daily use. But it was Dad's, and wearing it makes me feel connected to the parent who loved both of his sons and never imagined one would try to murder the other. Sometimes I wonder what Dad would say if he knew what happened. Whether he'd understand how money corrupted Caleb. Whether he'd blame himself for building an estate valuable enough to kill for. Whether he'd forgive either of us, me for surviving and keeping everything, Caleb for attempting murder and losing everything. I'll never know. Dad died thinking his sons would take care of each other after he was gone. Instead, one of us tried to kill the other before the funeral flowers had wilted. I got a letter from Caleb 2 months ago. The prison screened it and forwarded it to my attorney first, protocol for contact between criminals and their victims. The letter was 2 pages, handwritten, full of apologies and regrets and explanations that didn't really explain anything. He wrote about the moment he decided to tamper with my insulin. How he'd convinced himself it was just to make me look unreliable for a few weeks, not to actually kill me. How things had spiraled beyond his original intent. How he wished he could take it back. How he understood if I never forgave him. How he hoped I was doing okay and managing my diabetes well. The cognitive dissonance of that last line, hoping I'm managing the disease he'd weaponized against me, would be funny if it wasn't so tragic. My attorney asked if I wanted to respond. I said, no. What would I even say? Some betrayals are too profound for communication to bridge. Next month marks 4 years since the night I woke up on the bathroom floor with my blood sugar at 658. 4 years since my brother filmed my near death instead of helping. 4 years since I learned that the person who'd grown up sharing a room with me could look at me and see only an obstacle to wealth. Dr. Ramirez says anniversaries of trauma are difficult, that I should expect the memories to feel more intense as the date approaches. She's right. I've been having more nightmares lately. Dreams where I'm checking my blood sugar and the numbers keep climbing no matter how much insulin I take. Dreams where I'm searching for the tampered vials but can't find them. Dreams where I'm trying to tell someone what's happening, but no one believes me. I wake up and check my glucometer immediately, confirming that my blood sugar is normal, that the insulin is working, that I'm safe. It takes a while for my heart rate to settle. The inheritance money funded a diabetes education program at my high school. I worked with the district to create a comprehensive curriculum teaching students about metabolic disorders, insulin function, and the daily realities of chronic disease management. We bring in endocrinologists to speak, demonstrate continuous glucose monitors, and explain how modern medicine allows diabetics to live normal lives. I don't tell the students why I started this program or what happened with my brother. I just teach them that diabetes is manageable, that insulin is life-saving, and that understanding biochemistry can literally save lives. One of my students, a girl named Haley, who was diagnosed with type 1 last year, told me the program helped her feel less alone and less afraid. That made everything feel slightly more bearable. Dad's money filtered through Caleb's crime and my survival, helping a 16-year-old girl understand she's going to be okay. It's not redemption, but it's something. I still teach chemistry. I still take my insulin. I still check my blood sugar religiously. I still see Dr. Ramirez every week. I still avoid Columbus and anything associated with Dad's estate. I still have nightmares about my brother standing in the doorway with his phone out filming. But I'm alive. That's the irreducible fact underneath everything else. Caleb tried to kill me methodically and deliberately over the course of 4 weeks. He researched it, planned it, executed it, and documented it. And I'm still here. That survival doesn't erase the trauma or heal the betrayal, but it matters. Judge Hart said Caleb stole weeks of my life and nearly stole all of it. But he didn't. He's in prison serving 21 years, and I'm in Michigan teaching students about molecular bonds and living a quiet life he tried to take from me. The last thing Dr. Ramirez said in our most recent session was about reclaiming narrative. Your brother wrote a story where you were an obstacle to be removed, she said. But you're writing a different story now. One where you're a survivor, a teacher, someone who took incomprehensible betrayal and transformed it into advocacy and education. That's your narrative. That's your power. I'm still figuring out what that means in practice. Some days I feel powerful, like I've overcome something tremendous and emerged stronger. Other days I feel broken, like the trust Caleb shattered left cracks that will never fully heal. Both things are probably true. Both narratives exist simultaneously. I'm a survivor and I'm wounded. I inherited everything, and I lost my brother. I'm safe now, and I'll never feel completely safe again. That's the reality of living after attempted murder by family. You carry all of it forward, the survival and the scars, and you build whatever life you can from what remains. My boyfriend dumped me in a restaurant, left me a bill, and said, "Be grateful I dated you." I waited. 13 calls later, his lies ruined his career. My boyfriend called me ugly in front of his friends and ditched me in a restaurant, leaving me to pay for our meal. As he walked away, he exclaimed loudly, "A girl like you should be grateful I even dated you." I smiled and waited patiently. My phone blew up with 13 missed calls. I'm still absorbing what happened. I keep reliving it in my thoughts, wondering whether I dreamt the entire thing. But no, my maxed out credit card and ice cream smears on my couch prove it was real. For reference, I'd been with Adam for 2 years. 2 years. Not just a casual fling or whatever. We had the whole routine down. Netflix marathons, awkward holiday dinners with both families, and that bizarre couples yoga class he insisted on doing, which we both bombed at. Things were never ideal with us, are they ever? But I assumed we were solid. We had discussed the possibility of moving in together. He had these small bothersome habits, like leaving his socks all over the place, texting while watching movies, and making helpful comments about my appearance. Things like, "That shirt makes your arms look bigger." Or, "Have you thought about trying a different hairstyle?" I always dismissed it as him being honest. God past me was such a doormat. So Adam texted me about a meal with several coworkers. He'd never really included me in his job life before, always claiming it wasn't professional or something, so I was actually excited. I even went shopping for a new outfit, damn my budget, and spent hours getting ready. I'm referring to a whole YouTube makeup instruction and the pricey straightener I only use on exceptional occasions. I arrive at this highly pricey downtown restaurant with little portions and no prices on the menu. Red flag number 1. Adam has already arrived, accompanied by 2 coworkers, Leonard and Marcus. There's a strange vibe that greets me as I approach. Adam scarcely recognizes me, just a half stand from his chair and a short, "You're late." I was just 2 minutes late since parking was impossible. I sit down, and he notices my attire and says, "Oh, you wore that?" Not softly either. His friends exchanged glances, and I could feel my cheeks becoming hot. For the record, I was wearing a dark blue dress that I thought was attractive, nothing outrageous or inappropriate. I try to shrug it off, saying, "Is there a clothing code I missed?" But he just shrugs and says they've already ordered appetizers. Cool. Adam spends the next hour talking about work-related topics that I don't comprehend while his friends nod. When I try to join the conversation, Adam either speaks over me or explains why I'm wrong about what I just stated. At one point, I stated something about a customer at my store, and Adam interrupts with, "She doesn't really get how things work in the real business world," and waves dismissively. Like retail isn't a legitimate career. I have been a manager for 3 years. I'm sitting there, becoming increasingly uncomfortable, wondering if Adam has always been this condescending and I've simply never noticed, or if he's just showing off for his pals. Either way, it's not a good appearance. Then Leonard asks how we met, and I begin telling him about how his coworker Mia is my best friend and introduced us. Adam interrupts me in mid-sentence and replies, "Yes, Mia felt horrible for her. I was doing a favor actually." He laughs. "You guys," my stomach actually sank. That is not even close to how things happened. Mia had warned me about Adam's ego before we met, but she assured me that he was a wonderful guy underneath. Spoiler. He wasn't. I excused myself to the bathroom, partly to avoid crying in front of them. I'm in the bathroom texting Mia like, "What the fuck is going on?" when I receive a notification that Adam has just tagged himself at this restaurant on Instagram with Boys Night Out. As if I'm not even there. Mia calls me right away, but I send her to voicemail because I don't want the boys to hear me cry. I spray some water on my face, touch up my makeup, and give myself a sad little pep talk in the mirror about getting through dinner with dignity. When I return to the table, everyone is laughing over something, but it immediately stops when I sit down. Awesome. The server brings our main meals, and Adam starts making jokes about my food selection. I selected pasta, one of the less expensive selections because I was already concerned about the price, and he kept saying things like, "Carb loading for a marathon?" and, "That's a bold choice for someone with your body type." Each comment feels like a small paper cut, and they pile up quickly. At this point, I'm barely eating, simply moving food around my plate and counting down the minutes till I can leave. Then Marcus asks Adam about a presentation, and Adam goes on to tell him how his boss loved his ideas and that he is now in charge of the entire project. Something clicks in my brain. Adam had been worried about this presentation the week before, claiming that his segment was just 5 minutes long and that he was frightened. Is he suddenly a star? It's as if he lives in an alternate reality where he is the primary character. Then the bill arrives. The waiter places it on the table and Adam picks it up. Looks at it for a moment, then slides it across to me. I believe he is simply showing me the total. But then he says something I will never forget. "You know what? I do not think this is working." I stare at him, waiting for the punchline. There isn't one. "I've been trying to make this work, but I'm just not attracted to you now. I think we should break up." In the center of a restaurant. In front of his friends. After 2 years together. Who does this? I'm taken entirely by surprise. "Are you serious now? Is this how you want to do it?" He stands up, takes his jacket and adds, "God, I still have a knot in my stomach thinking about it. A girl like you should be grateful I've dated you this long. You aren't exactly the prize." Then he and his companions simply left. Everyone walked out together. Laughing, I'm left with a $347 bill for all of their dumb Wagyu appetizers and pricey beverages. The waiter approached with an expression of sadness that made everything 1,000 times worse. I paid the bill using my credit card, which I'm still paying off from Christmas, and managed to get to my car without completely coming apart. I called Mia from the parking lot, sobbing so hard that she didn't understand me at first. She arrived at my apartment with a pint of Ben & Jerry's and a bottle of wine. The actual MVP. Between ugly crying and stress-eating cookie dough, I told her everything. She was furious, and I had to talk her out of driving to Adam's apartment and raising a commotion. That's when she went odd. She kept asking questions regarding Adam's comments about work, the project he mentioned, and his position in the organization. Finally, she said, "Sabrina, I don't know how to tell you this, but Adam isn't who he says he is at work. It turns out Adam isn't a hotshot marketing person about to be promoted. He works as an assistant, making coffee runs and scheduling meetings. All the business trips? Complete fabrications. What about the major presentation? He was only preparing the slides for the actual team. What is the fancy title on his LinkedIn? Complete fiction." I felt like an idiot. For 2 years, he had been lying about almost everything, and I never questioned it. What else had he lied about? That night when Mia departed, I went into investigative mode. I went back through our text messages, images and everything. There were so many contradictions that I had missed. Comments regarding money that did not add up. He occasionally had to work late, although his location took him across town. I could not sleep. I kept thinking about that time at the restaurant, how little he made me feel, how embarrassed I was. At around 3 a.m., I received a text message from an unknown number. "Hi, this is Ethan from Adam's office. Mia gave me your number. There's a few things you should know." That's when things became really intriguing. First, thank you everyone so much for your encouraging comments on my previous post. Reading some of them made me cry, but in a nice way. Many of you requested an update, so here's what happened next in this totally insane incident. After learning from Ethan, who works with Adam, that my partner of 2 years had been living in his own fantasy world, I spent the next 4 days in a terrible post-breakup fog. You know, the one when you alternate between bawling into a pint of ice cream and furiously scrolling through old images, wondering if any of it was genuine. My apartment resembled a catastrophe zone. Dishes piled up, washing everywhere, and about 7 empty DoorDash bags because cooking seemed impossible. The hardest part was that I kept thinking of humorous things to send Adam, then remembering what happened, and it felt like I was dumped all over again. My mind was practically trapped in a loop of, did that really happen? And why didn't I see this coming? I'd also avoided social media since I knew Adam's posts would be irritating. But eventually, I surrendered and checked Instagram. Sure enough, there was Adam, with a gym selfie entitled, "Level Up. Know Your Worth." The boldness. I almost flung my phone across the room. Mia arrived that evening with takeaway and found me wrapped in my comforter, like a melancholy burrito. She's been fantastic throughout this whole affair, making sure I eat real food, listening to me whine about the same things again and over, and never saying, "I told you so," despite having her doubts about Adam from the start. While we were dining, Mia gave me her texts from Ethan. Apparently they had been talking a lot, and he had tea to spill. According to Ethan, Adam had been telling everyone at work that he dumped me because I was needy and always mentioned marriage. What? I did not create a Pinterest board named Future Home Ideas. Adam did, and he claimed it was research for some work assignment. Then Ethan dropped the real bomb. Adam wasn't just lying about his job title. He was on probation for taking credit for other people's work and might be fired shortly. What about all the late nights working? He was hurriedly trying to correct errors before anyone noticed. Business trips? This is complete fiction. I was still processing everything when my phone rang. It was Laura, Adam's mother. I almost didn't respond awkwardly, but I decided to be mature about it. Laura has always been so lovely to me. Remembering my birthday and genuinely asking questions about my life is kind of nice. She sounded concerned and inquired whether everything was fine between me and Adam. Apparently he informed his family that we had a little fight, but everything was great. A small fight. The man publicly humiliated me, deserted me in front of his buddies, and left me with a large debt. I attempted to be vague, claiming we were taking up space because I didn't want to place her in the middle. She then recounted Adam's birthday dinner on Saturday, and how excited the entire family was to see me there. Guys, I almost choked on my lo mein. Adam had informed his family that we were still together and that I was coming to his birthday dinner. The meal was at his parents' place, and he supposedly informed them we had important news to impart. After hanging up, I sat there stunned, while Mia looked at me as if I had grown a second head. She was like, is he deluded, or a pathological liar? Honestly, I was wondering the same thing. That's when we devised the plan. I was not going to just ignore his family. They had always been kind to me, and they deserved to know who Adam truly was. But I wasn't going to make a scene or be vengeful. I would simply attend the meal as invited and let the facts unfold spontaneously. The next day, Ethan and I met for coffee. We had only met through Adam, so it was rather weird, but he turned out to be incredibly nice. He validated everything and provided additional information regarding Adam's work falsehoods. Adam claimed to be the leader of a team that included only himself and 2 interns. What about the major presentation he was in charge of last month? He was only managing the slideshow while his boss spoke. Ethan appeared genuinely concerned on my behalf, claiming that Adam's stories about me had always looked odd. Apparently, Adam would come to work whining that I was high maintenance, despite the fact that I was paying for the majority of our dates at the end since Adam claimed to be between paychecks, which I now realize probably meant he was awful with money. Midway during our chat, Ethan received a text from their boss asking if he could come in on Saturday evening to assist with an emergency assignment. Ethan was disappointed because he'd made arrangements, but then I had an idea. What if Ethan needed to drop something off at Adam's parents' house during his birthday dinner? The timing would be ideal. As we were working out the specifics, my phone rang with a text from Adam. First since the restaurant incident. It simply stated, "We need to discuss what happened." I might have overreacted. Might have? I showed Ethan and he almost spit up his coffee. Overreacting is when you become irritated by someone's tardiness, not when you publicly humiliate your girlfriend of 2 years and charge her $300. I did not respond. Allow him to sweat. The following 2 days were a whirlwind of preparation. I was not going to this meal unprepared. I combed over ancient texts, uncovering all the lies. Dates when he claimed to be attending work conferences that did not exist. Ethan confirmed that stories about coworkers had been invented. Adam even posted images of himself at work events that were actually downloaded off the company's website. Mia came over on Friday night to assist me choose an outfit. I'm not going to lie. Part of me wanted to show up looking fantastic simply to spite him. But we thought that the ideal way was to look attractive without appearing to try too hard. We decided on a plain black dress that Adam once remarked made me appear average, which I now realize was his strange nagging attempt because I got comments every time I wore it. I barely slept. What if this backfires? What if his family supported him? What if I froze and couldn't go ahead with it? By the time I was getting ready, I'd eaten my nails down to nothing and had run through roughly 17 possible situations. Around midday, Adam texted again. I look forward to seeing you tonight. Wear something lovely. My folks are excited. I did not respond to that either. Let him think what he wants. I spent the afternoon getting ready, feeling a strange mix of anxiety and anticipation. Mia helped me with my hair and gave me a pep talk when I was losing confidence. At 5:30, I got into my car and drove to his parents' house. I had to pull over once because my hands were too shaky to drive securely. I sat there for a minute, practicing the breathing exercises from the meditation app I got months ago but never used. What was I doing? Was this crazy? Maybe I should just block Adam on everything and live my life normally. But then I thought about him sitting there at his birthday dinner, most likely telling everyone a fabricated version of our relationship, possibly even playing the victim, and my resolve stiffened. I arrived at his parents' place fashionably late, which I knew would irritate Adam. Several automobiles were already in the driveway. It appeared that the entire family was present. I checked my cosmetics in the rearview mirror, took one final deep breath, and headed to the door. Adam's father opened it with a bright smile and an embrace, leading me inside. The home smelled like Laura's wonderful pot roast, and I felt a twinge of regret. I really liked Adam's family, and this was probably the last time I'd see them. I turned the corner into the living area, and there was Adam. He had a drink in his hand and was laughing at something his cousin had said. He froze when he saw me, evidently not expecting me to arrive, despite what he had told his family. The expression on his face was priceless. Panic raced across his features for a short second before he calmed down and approached with a phony smile. He hugged me firmly and muttered, "You actually came. We need to speak privately." I simply grinned and shouted loudly enough for everyone to hear, "I would never miss your birthday for anything. Especially considering you've been telling everyone we have important news to share." His face lost its color. Laura clasped her hands happily and asked if this was what she expected. Adam's sister sent me a knowing look. His father started joking about finally having grandchildren. Adam grasped my elbow a little too tightly and tried to steer me down the corridor, but his mother announced that dinner was ready and everyone needed to sit down. As we all took our places around the dining table, Adam nervously monitoring my every move, my phone vibrated with a text message from Ethan. "On my way. It's 15 minutes out." Adam leaned down and hissed, "What are you doing here?" I pondered after the restaurant. I simply smiled pleasantly and repeated, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Oh Adam, I would not pass up the opportunity to tell your family about what happened at that restaurant. I'm sure they'd like hearing that story." The look of complete dread on his face when his mother began bringing out the meal. It was worth every second of anxiousness to get there. It's game on. Second update. I'm finally ready to discuss what happened at Adam's birthday dinner. Sorry about the delay, I needed a mental health day after all of this drama. Furthermore, my Wi-Fi has been acting up since a neighbor grabbed my password and presumably downloaded the entire internet. Where have we left off? I was seated at the dinner table with Adam's family, and he was worried about what I would say. So there I was, surrounded by Adam's family, his parents, Laura and George, his sister Brianna, his grandmother, and two cousins whose names I constantly mix up. Laura's wonderful pot roast, those buttery mashed potatoes I'd literally dreamed about, and a fancy salad that no one was going to eat but everyone would pretend to like. The first 20 minutes were just unpleasant. Adam kept trying to manage the conversation while giving me warning stares. I simply smiled and passed the bread rolls, relishing how his left eye twitched whenever I opened my mouth. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. Laura kept the conversation going, bless her. She inquired about my family, job, and the usual small conversation. When she mentioned how proud everyone was of Adam's major promotion, I almost choked on my water. I looked at Adam, whose face had turned the same shade as the beets on the table. Adam chimed in, mentioning how his team was crushing their targets and how his supervisor was essentially grooming him for senior management. I simply nodded along, watching him burrow deeper with each syllable. George, who has usually been silent, suddenly inquired about the Johnson account. Apparently Adam had been informing his father about a big deal he was allegedly leading. Adam's response was so hazy that it could have been a horoscope about strategic pivots and leveraging core competency that meant nothing. His sister Brianna attracted my attention across the table. She's always been the suspicious one in the family, the sort who Googles facts during disagreements and calls others out on their lies. She lifted an eyebrow at me as if to ask, "Is he serious right now?" Laura then brought up the future. She inquired about our big news and whether it related to our next steps. Adam nearly dropped his fork and murmured something about how it was not the appropriate moment to address it. His grandmother, who has no filter and is my absolute favorite person in his family, interrupts with, "So, are you two moving in together or not? Because Adam mentioned you were shopping for apartments together." Again, this is news to me. The furthest we'd gotten in that conversation was my suggesting we combine our Netflix accounts to save money. Adam tried to redirect the subject back to himself, mentioning how his boss had given him a company card for business expenses. I could not help myself. I inquired about the types of expenses he was authorized to approve. He mumbled something about client dinners and team outings. That's when I casually added, "Oh, speaking of evenings, Adam treated me to this fantastic restaurant last week. What was its name again, honey? Where did you meet Leonard and Marcus?" The color on his face drained faster than my phone battery on TikTok. Seriously, my phone can't take more than 20 minutes of browsing without dying. Anyone else? Before he could answer, the doorbell rang. Perfect timing. Laura rushed to answer it, and I heard her exclaim, "Oh, Ethan! What a surprise!" Adam looked like he was about to pass out. Ethan entered with a folder, dressed professionally in his button-up shirt. He apologized for disturbing Adam's birthday meal, but he had some work documents that Adam wanted to sign right away on Monday morning. Laura, as the ideal host, quickly invited him to join us for cake later. Adam tried to lead Ethan to the front door, but George urged them to handle work right there at the table, because we're all family here. Ethan sat on the empty chair beside me, which I had strategically spared. I'm not going to lie, Adam was gripping his fork so tightly that I thought it may bend. That's when George asked Ethan how the major presentation went, which Adam had supposedly led. Ethan was perplexed for a moment before catching on. He looked at me and then at Adam, and I saw him making a decision. Ethan stated that the presentation went well, but added that their boss presented it, with Adam and the team providing assistance. George was perplexed and replied, "That wasn't how Adam described it." I jumped in because I'm messy like that and asked Ethan about Adam's promotion. Poor Ethan seemed so uncomfortable, torn between devotion to a comrade and refusing to lie to an entire family. He fidgeted with his napkin and made some vague remarks about company restructuring. Adam interjected with a phony laugh and attempted to change the conversation to sports or anything, but his sister was not having it. She asked Ethan directly what Adam's current title was. The hush that followed was similar to when you drop something in a public bathroom. Everybody hears it. Nobody wants to admit it. Ethan stared at Adam, who was quietly pleading with his eyes, and then at me. I nodded slightly. He cleared his throat and explained that Adam was an administrative assistant in the marketing department. The silence. George lowered his fork carefully. His grandmother made a small sound. Brianna said something that sounded remarkably like, "I knew it." Adam instantly went into damage control mode, claiming that Ethan was confused, that he had numerous duties, and that everything was convoluted. But the dam had cracked. His relatives began asking him specific questions, which he couldn't avoid. When were you promoted? He hadn't. Why did you claim you have a team? He didn't. What about the corner office you mentioned? Also fictitious. Adam's stories became more detailed with each query. He kept looking at me as if this was my fault, which made me even more eager to let it all out. Laura, bless her heart, attempted to smooth things over. She advised we all have some cake and talk about brighter topics. Brianna questioned me about the restaurant I mentioned earlier as she went to the kitchen to get it. This was my moment. I took a big breath and told them everything. How Adam had invited me to meet his friends, how he belittled me throughout dinner, and how he ditched me in front of everyone and went away, leaving me with a $347 bill I couldn't afford. Adam tried to interrupt numerous times, but his father cut him off with a look of sheer disappointment that I had never seen before. Adam's defense: that I was exaggerating and playing the victim. That I had embarrassed him in front of his colleagues by not fitting in. That leaving me with the bill was teaching me financial responsibility. His grandmother literally snorted at the last one. Ethan, who had been silent for most of this, eventually spoke up. He validated my tale, saying he'd heard Adam bragging to coworkers about how he'd put me in my place. He even took out his phone and showed texts from Marcus receipts, y'all detailing what had happened. Laura returned with the cake just as Adam attempted to paint himself as the victim. She placed it down and inquired what she had missed. Nobody talked for a time. Then Adam's father suggested quietly that they needed to have a family discussion about honesty. Adam exploded, like a full-blown anger tantrum. He accused me of turning his family against him, referred to Ethan as a traitor, and claimed that everyone was simply jealous of his success. What is success? He knocked down his water glass, pointed at me, and exclaimed, "A girl like me should be grateful he even bothered with me." His mother gasped. His grandmother muttered something that I'm sure was old folks swearing. His sister simply shook her head, as if she wasn't surprised. I remained calm and stated that the only thing I was thankful for was finally seeing who he truly was. Adam stormed out, slamming the door so violently that one of Laura's ornamental plates shattered. The aftermath was unusually quiet. Laura apologized to me around 50 times. George appeared exhausted and dejected. Brianna helped mop up the spilled water. Ethan apologized for his role in the embarrassing situation, but he couldn't stand by while Adam lied to everyone. The oddest thing happened. Rather than telling me to go, they urged that I stay for cake. We all sat there, Adam's ex-girlfriend, co-worker and family, enjoying birthday cake without the birthday boy. The circumstance could have been embarrassing, but it didn't feel that way. After the cake, I helped Laura clean up the kitchen. She kept apologizing, claiming she had no idea Adam had been lying so much. She appeared truly devastated, not only about what he'd done to me, but also about who her son had become. I felt sorry for her, to be honest. It's difficult for parents to accept their child's negative qualities. She softly inquired whether there had been any warning signals earlier, and I replied that, in retrospect, there had been red lights that I had disregarded because I wanted to believe the best about him. When I was about to depart, Adam's father grabbed me aside. He thanked me for being honest and apologized for what his kid had done. He appeared defeated, as if he was trying to figure out where they had gone wrong when parenting him. I informed him that it wasn't their fault Adam made his own decisions. Ethan volunteered to take me to my car, perhaps understanding that I needed a moment to comprehend things. As we proceeded down the road, he added that Adam had been having trouble at work for months, stealing credit for other people's ideas, lying about his efforts, and even forging customer correspondence. He was on his final warning before possible termination. Suddenly, Adam's intense desire to be successful made twisted sense. His entire persona was based around this fabricated appearance of prosperity and status. When I considered it this way, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. I thanked Ethan for his support and drove home in a strange combination of emotional weariness and relief. Like when you finally remove an uncomfortable bra at the end of the day. Sorry for the strange analogy, but you understand what I mean. When I arrived home, I had 3 missed calls from Mia requesting updates. I was going to call her back when my phone buzzed with a text message from Adam. "You have damaged everything. This is not over." I did not respond. I simply blocked his number and made myself some tea. I should have been afraid or upset, but really? I just felt exhausted. And even a little proud of myself for standing up to him. I assumed that was the end of it. I actually did. But this morning, my phone was flooded with 13 missed calls from Adam's mother, sister, Ethan, and a few numbers I didn't know. Something had occurred overnight. And based on the increasingly hysterical voicemails, Adam had completely lost control. Last update. I'm now ready to explain the 13 missed calls. Thank you for your patience as I processed all that happened. Also, sorry for the delay. My laptop decided to perform a surprise 4-hour update just as I sat down to write this. So where were we? I awoke to find my phone inundated with calls from Adam's family and Ethan. At first I believed someone had died or something. As I looked through the notifications, my stomach dropped. There were 5 missed calls from Laura, 3 from Brianna, 2 from Ethan, and 3 from numbers I didn't recognize. I contacted Laura first since she looked the most concerned, based on her voicemails, which were all variants of, "Sabrina, please call me as soon as you can." She answered the first call, sounding weary. Adam apparently went on a tremendous bender after storming out of his birthday meal. He arrived at his ex-girlfriend's apartment at around 2 a.m., inebriated and shouting about how I had ruined his life. To be honest, the ex, who I had no idea existed, was understandably frightened and phoned Brianna, who had to go get him. But that was not all. Adam had also spent the night sending bizarre messages to almost everyone we knew. He texted Ethan and threatened to ruin him at work. He wrote a long, rambling Facebook update about how he was surrounded by snakes, and that people would regret abandoning him. Most troubling was that he had disclosed my address in a private message to his friend Marcus, threatening to make me pay for humiliating him. Marcus, who appears to have a moral compass, immediately called Laura and sent the message, which explains why she was so frantic to reach me. I was sitting on my couch in my ragged old pajamas, hair still in yesterday's sloppy bun, trying to comprehend all of this information while Laura apologized about 50 times for her son's actions. I should have been afraid, I suppose. But honestly, I was just exhausted. For example, when your phone has been stuck at 1% battery for hours, waiting for it to die so you may charge it and go on. Laura's visit to check on me was kind, but it also prompted me to tidy my apartment quickly. Nothing encourages you to clean up like knowing someone's mom is about to see your living area, am I right? My doorbell rang as I was literally flinging dirty laundry into my closet and wiping dried toothpaste from the bathroom sink. Brianna was with her as well. They brought coffee and those little pastries from the bakery near their house, which, to be honest, are probably what I miss the most about being with Adam. We sat at my tiny kitchen table with the rickety leg I'd been wanting to fix for months, and they told me about the Adam predicament. According to Brianna, Adam has previously lied about his life. In college, he supposedly informed everyone he was on the baseball team despite the fact that he had been cut during auditions. He once claimed to be speaking with a popular girl who had no idea who he was. He had a propensity of creating a fictional version of himself who was more successful, popular, and everything. My phone was constantly vibrating with texts from people who had witnessed Adam's social media meltdown while they were conversing. Mia was stressed, worried, and wanted to come over with her boyfriend, who does kickboxing just in case. She watches way too many crime shows, I swear. My group chat was filled with puzzled replies about Adam's theatrical subtweets. That's when the doorbell rang again. I actually froze, wondering if it was Adam. Brianna peered through the slats and took a deep breath. It was Ethan. Apparently Adam had been blowing up his phone all morning, and Ethan wanted to warn me in person since Adam had suggested paying me a visit. So there we were, Adam's mother, sister and co-worker, sitting in my living room on a Sunday morning, trying to figure out what to do about this man-child who was having a tantrum because he had been caught in his lies. If it hadn't been so stressful, it would have been funny. Imagine explaining this incident to someone who was not present. Ethan added that their supervisor was already aware of Adam's social media outburst. Someone had screenshotted and forwarded it. So, Monday at work was going to be interesting. Brianna was concerned Adam might do something dumb if he lost his job on top of everything else. That's when the doorbell rang again. This time it was the building manager who appeared quite awkward. Apparently Adam had been downstairs causing a commotion in the lobby, demanding to be permitted into my apartment. Adam rushed off after the manager refused and threatened to call the police, yelling that I was lying loudly enough to be heard on the entire first floor. Laura appeared devastated. She kept apologizing and claimed she didn't know what had gone wrong with him. I felt awful for her, imagining that your adult son is essentially a walking red sign. Brianna was more practical, advising that I document everything just in case Adam's conduct worsened. We were all sitting there trying to figure out what to do when my phone vibrated with a notice. Adam tagged me in an Instagram story. Despite my better judgment and everyone in the room begging me not to look, I opened it. It was a snapshot of me from early in our relationship, asleep on his couch with my mouth open. The caption reads, "Miss Flawless who wrecked my birthday, isn't exactly flawless. A girl like you should be thankful that anyone took photos of her at all." As if that was his big revenge? A slightly unattractive snapshot taken 2 years ago? I actually laughed out loud, which Laura had not expected, but honestly, if it was the worst he could do, I would be all right. A loud knocking on my door interrupted our discussion about the next steps. We all jumped. Then we heard Adam's voice, slurring slightly. "I know you are in there, open the door." Ethan quickly rose up as if he were about to confront Adam, which was sweet but needless. I was already contacting the building's security guard. The advantages of a slightly more expensive apartment building. Adam kept hammering and cursing, and I could hear my neighbor's door open as she stepped out to check what was going on. Adam had already started kicking the door when security arrived. The security guard did not screw around. He warned Adam to leave or he would contact the cops. There was some unclear back and forth, followed by silence. The guard softly knocked and informed me that Adam had left the building but was still in the parking lot, possibly waiting. Laura felt ashamed. She insisted on going down to deal with her son herself, and I was delighted to allow her. She was so unhappy that George Adams' father had to come pick them up. The scenario was sad. After they went, Ethan and I sat on my couch in startled quiet for a while. He finally broke it by asking whether I had any alcohol, which seemed like a suitable reaction given the morning we'd had. We shared a bottle of wine I had been saving for a special occasion, and it absolutely counted. When Ethan departed, it was late afternoon, and I was emotionally weary. Mia came over and remained the night in case Adam chose to make another appearance. He didn't, fortunately. We ordered pizza, watched horrible reality TV, and tried to understand how chaotic my life had become. The following weeks were an adjustment period. Adam was sacked from his job after failing to show up for 3 days and sending disrespectful emails to several co-workers. Brianna and I have maintained in touch, so I just know he temporarily moved back to live with his parents. She's actually rather cool. Sometimes we receive coffee. Adam attempted to contact me several more times, leaving voicemails ranging from angry to teary to strangely nostalgic. I saved them all in case but never replied. He made a few phony Instagram accounts to message me, but they were all plainly him. Who else would type, "You're making a big mistake" with that spelling error? That I immediately blocked them. The strangest thing was running into him at Target about a month later. I was in the home area, looking at shower curtains, when I noticed him holding a pack of socks and looking as if he hadn't slept for days. We made eye contact, and for a split second, I feared he was going to start a disturbance. Instead, he simply turned around and walked away, leaving his shopping basket there in the aisle. It was 3 months ago now. Adam moved to his uncle's house in another state, according to Laura, who still sends him holiday cards, which is kind but odd. His social media has been unusually silent. Brianna believes his parents have finally cut him off financially until he seeks therapy. As for me, I'm doing very well actually. My flat feels more like mine now that I've changed the furnishings and replaced the items that reminded me of Adam. The oddest outcome of all this could be my surprising friendship with Ethan. We're not dating, though Mia continues trying, but we do get together for lunch occasionally and text about ridiculous TikTok videos. It's wonderful to have someone who has experienced the entire Adam saga and knows why I now have trust issues the size of Texas. Looking back on everything, I'm no longer upset. Well, not just angry. I'm also weirdly grateful. Not for dating Adam, and definitely not. However, before proceeding, he needed to discover who he truly was. Imagine if I had moved in with him. Shudder. My parents banned me from Christmas for years and only loved my brother. At his job interview, HR revealed I was the CEO, and his face went pale. My name is Selene Drayton, and I am 32 years old. I am the CEO of Techician Solutions, a technology startup that has developed into a mid-sized firm with over 200 people. But my route to achievement was not paved with family blessings. Quite the reverse. Growing up in Pittsburgh, I was always the odd one out. My parents, Edmund and Isolde, made it quite apparent that my younger brother Alaric was the golden child. Alaric, 3 years my junior, had it all. The newest toys, the best opportunities, and most importantly, their undivided attention and adoration. From a young age, I learned to be self-sufficient. My parents attended all of Alaric's little league games and school productions, but they were rarely present for my academic competitions or piano recital. "We're busy with Alaric's event" was the most prevalent sentence I heard. When it came time for college, the difference was much more pronounced. "We've been saving for Alaric's education since he was born," my father told me when I inquired about financial assistance. "He plans to be a doctor or a lawyer eventually." "Selene, you've always been independent." I finished with honors in computer science and business administration, having worked 3 part-time jobs and taken a full academic load at State University. Meanwhile, Alaric drank his way through freshman year at a costly private institution, soon dropped out, and then persuaded our parents to pay his gap year, which suddenly turned into 3 years of finding himself, while traveling through Europe and Asia on their dime. After college, I landed an entry-level position at a small tech firm. The pay was minimal, but the experience was invaluable. I lived in a tiny studio, worked 60-hour weeks, and poured every spare minute into developing my skills and building side projects. While Alaric posted exotic vacation photos, I was coding until 3 a.m., determined to create something meaningful. My breakthrough came 5 years ago. I developed a revolutionary AI-powered customer relationship management system, pitched it to countless investors, faced rejection after rejection, but eventually secured enough funding to launch Techician Solutions. The first 2 years were brutal. I worked around the clock and poured everything I had into making the company succeed. By year 3, our software had gained traction, major companies began adopting our platform, and revenue flowed in, and we expanded, moved into a proper office, and I finally started paying myself a reasonable salary. There were times when I thought we wouldn't make it, because funding was low and the product wasn't quite there, but I persisted. This year, Techician Solutions became a major player in the tech industry, valued at over $200 million. Throughout this journey, my communication with my family dwindled to occasional holiday phone calls. My parents never asked about my company, and when I tried to share my successes, they'd quickly change the subject to Alaric's latest venture, which inevitably failed by the time they told me about it. Alaric eventually returned to the United States and, with our parents' connections, landed a job at a marketing firm. He did the bare minimum, but somehow always received praise from our parents. Alaric is really finding his way in the corporate world, my mother would say, completely ignoring the fact that I was running my own wildly successful business. In December, 3 weeks before Christmas, everything came to a head. I was sitting in my corner office overlooking the Seattle skyline, reviewing year-end reports, when my phone rang. It was my mother, an unusual occurrence on a Tuesday afternoon. "Celine, dear," she said in that overly sweet voice she only used when she wanted something. "I'm calling about Christmas this year." In recent years I'd received a text message invitation at most, usually just days before, but a phone call 3 weeks in advance was unprecedented. "We're having everyone over on Christmas Eve," she continued. "It would be lovely if you could join us." A warmth spread through my chest. Despite everything, I still craved my family's acceptance. Perhaps things were changing. "That sounds nice, Mom," I said, trying to keep optimism out of my voice. "I think I can make it." "Wonderful," she exclaimed. "Oh, and Alaric is bringing his new girlfriend, Marigold Vance. She works at Hargrove and Partners, a famous consulting business. Her father is a partner there." And there it was, the real reason for the call. "She's really fantastic," my mother continued, oblivious to my silence. "Harvard Business School. Fast track to junior partner. Alaric met her at a charity gala. Everyone is so impressed by her. Your father informs everyone that his son is dating a Harvard graduate. Can you imagine the Drayton family ascending in the world?" I took a deep breath. "Mom, did I mention that Takishan was featured in Forbes last month? We plan to extend into Europe next year." "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said. "Anyway, Marigold comes from a very good family. Her mother serves on the board of the symphony orchestra, and they have a summer house in the Hamptons. Alaric suggests they travel there for New Year's. Isn't this exciting?" I bit my tongue. "Very thrilling. Listen, Mom, I need to return to work. I have a meeting in 5 minutes." "Of course, dear. We will see you at Christmas. Wear something pleasant, will you? None of those business suits. Marigold is incredibly fashion-forward." After we hung up, I gazed at my phone. My mother's behavior shouldn't have surprised me, but it still hurt. I shook it off and went back to work, trying not to think about the forthcoming holiday. A week before Christmas, I was finishing my travel preparations when my phone rang again, this time from my father. He rarely calls me, so I answered instantly, alarmed. He said, "Celine," gruffly and without greeting. "Dad, is everything all right?" "I'm calling about Christmas," he stated. "Your mother and I have been talking, and we think it might be best if you don't come this year." I sat in startled stillness, my hand clutching the phone. "Alaric's girlfriend comes from a good family," he added firmly. "We don't want anything to complicate things." "Complicate things?" I repeated, scarcely audible. "What does that mean? Do you understand what I mean? Celine and Marigold are wealthy and successful. Her family has ties. We need to show her that our family is respectable, but I am not." The words came out sharper than I had intended. "Don't twist my words," he yelled. "Your brother has an opportunity for a good future here. The last thing we need is you bringing in your alternative lifestyle." "My alternative lifestyle?" I was very perplexed. "Dad, I'm the CEO of a technological company. What exactly are you talking about?" "All that independent woman stuff, the career obsession, the way you always have to one-up your brother with your so-called success." So-called success? The word struck me like a physical blow. "You've always been difficult, Celine," he said when I didn't react. "You've always had to do things your way, never mind how it affects the family. Can you think of someone else for a moment? Think of your brother's future." I sat there, phone clamped to my ear, as my father shattered every notion I had about my status in the family. I wasn't being barred from Christmas because of anything I had done. I was being banned because of who I was: accomplished, independent, and unwilling to pretend I was anything less than I was. "I understand," I finally answered, my voice firm despite the tears threatening to fall. "Enjoy your Christmas." "Good," he said, happy that I didn't fight. "Your mother will call you after the holidays." After hanging up, I sat motionless at my desk, staring out at the Seattle skyline as the winter sun set early, casting long shadows across the city. I had built this company, this career, this life, all on my own, without their help or support, and it still wasn't enough to earn a place at their Christmas table. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to cry over my family's rejection. Deep, gut-wrenching sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the little girl who had never been enough, the teenager who had worked herself to exhaustion trying to earn approval that would never come, and the woman who, despite everything, yearned for her parents' acceptance. When the tears stopped, I wiped my face, squared my shoulders, and went back to work. If I wasn't allowed to spend Christmas at my parents' place, I would make my own celebration. It was my first Christmas alone, and the silence was deafening. From my rooftop apartment in Seattle, I could see the Space Needle lit up with holiday lights. I had just decorated a modest tree and a few ornaments. Callista, my executive assistant, sent me a note saying, "Merry Christmas, Celine. Remember, my mom's legendary eggnog is ready for you if you change your mind about coming over." Callista had been horrified when I indicated I'd be spending Christmas alone and had instantly invited me, which I respectfully declined, not wanting to intrude. Before I could react, I received another message from Ophelia, my best friend since college. "Merry Christmas, Becca. Dorian and the kids are inquiring when Auntie Celine will arrive. The ham is in the oven, and there's a glass of wine bearing your name on it. Please tell me you aren't spending the day alone in your antiseptic flat." I smiled despite myself because Ophelia knew me too well. We had met during freshman orientation and been inseparable ever since. She had witnessed firsthand my struggles with my family, and had opened her own family to me without hesitation. I stared at my phone for a long time before making a decision. I texted Ophelia back, "Give me an hour. I will bring dessert." I quickly showered and dressed, then drove at the only open bakery to pick up a chocolate cake. As I parked into Ophelia's suburban driveway, the front door burst wide, and her 7-year-old twins, Isabeau and Caspian, raced out to greet me, still wearing their Christmas jammies. "Auntie Celine, did you come?" Isabeau squealed. "We thought you weren't coming," Caspian said, grabbing the cake box. "Mom said you were working." "I finished early," I pretended, following them inside. Ophelia's home was the polar opposite of my minimalist apartment. Every surface was adorned with Christmas cheer, the air smelled of cinnamon and roasting ham, and Christmas music played softly. Ophelia appeared from her kitchen. "You came," she exclaimed, her voice filled with relief, and she hugged me hard. "I'm so glad." Her husband, Dorian, came behind her, holding their 2-year-old daughter, Amara, on his hip. "About time you showed up, Celine. Ophelia has been checking her phone every 5 minutes." I was enveloped in the warmth of Ophelia's family. We ate a delicious meal, opened presents. Ophelia always had gifts for me, played board games with the kids, and talked and laughed by the fire. No one asked about my work or accomplishments, or compared me to anyone else. I was simply Celine, a loved and welcomed member of their celebration. As the evening progressed, I helped Ophelia clean up the kitchen. "Thank you for today," I murmured quietly. "I needed this more than I realized." Ophelia squeezed my shoulder and said, "Your family, Becca. You will always have a place here." Family. The word both warmed and wounded me. When I returned to my apartment that night, my phone had a new message from Alaric, and it contained a photo of my parents' Christmas celebration. There they were. My parents, Alaric, and a beautiful woman who must have been Marigold, all smiling in front of the Christmas tree I remembered from childhood, with the same ornaments and star on top. The message said, "Merry Christmas. I wish you could have been here, but Marigold's family had also joined us, and it was a tight squeeze. Perhaps next year." My childhood home had 5 bedrooms and a large living and dining room, but it was never about space. I stared at the photo for a long time, noting how proud my father looked with his arm around Alaric and how my mother beamed at Marigold. They were a picture-perfect family, and there was no room for me in the frame. At that moment, something inside me shifted, a door closed and a window opened. If my family didn't perceive my worth, I would stop seeking their approval and focus all of my efforts on the one thing that had never failed me: my work. I worked more hours than ever before during the week between Christmas and New Year's. My team was on vacation, so the office was quiet, allowing me to work without interruption. I refined our 5-year expansion plan, started discussions with potential European partners, and created a new marketing strategy. Callista returned to work in early January and was surprised to find my office completely reorganized. "Did you work for the entire holiday?" she inquired, concerned. "I had a breakthrough," I said, barely looking up from my computer. "I think this is going to be our biggest year yet." In the 3 months that followed, Techician Solutions signed 2 large contracts with Fortune 500 businesses, confirmed our European development plans, and began creating a new AI product that promised to transform the industry. During this time I didn't think much about my family. My parents didn't call after Christmas, and I made no effort to contact them. Alaric occasionally texted me updates on Marigold, but I responded with brief, polite messages that revealed nothing about my personal life. As a result, the company thrived. As March approached, I was fully immersed in preparations for our biggest expansion yet. We were moving to a larger office space in downtown Seattle, hiring dozens of new employees across all departments, and Techvision Solutions was no longer a startup, but a major player in the tech industry, with me at the helm. Celine, do you have a minute? Our HR director Elowen Price popped into my office one afternoon in mid-March. Of course, Elowen, what's up? Elowen arrived, locking the door behind her, holding a folder in her hands and wearing a strange expression that ranged between amusement and concern. We've received over 300 applications for the senior project manager positions, she said, seated next to me. The hiring team has narrowed it down to about 20 candidates for first-round interviews. That's wonderful, I remarked, wondering why this needed to be done in person rather than via email. Are you finding quality candidates? For the most part, yes, she said. But there's one application I thought you should see. She slid the folder onto my desk and toward me. My brother, Alaric Drayton, had a resume inside, which I quickly scanned, noting the inflated job titles and vague accomplishments he had listed. His current position was executive marketing strategist at a small local firm, where he was at best a mid-level marketing associate. Was you aware he was applying? Elowen inquired carefully, as she was one of the few people at the company who understood anything about my family. No, I said, still looking at the resume. I had no idea. He was quite confident during the phone screening, Elowen recounted with a chuckle. Actually, he was rather condescending to Saran in HR, assuming she was just a secretary and asking to speak to someone who actually makes decisions. I winced. That sounded just like Alaric. The position requires at least 5 years of project management experience and proficiency in 3 programming languages, Elowen added. As you can see, his resume does not meet those requirements. But he requested that we consider him for a senior role rather than an entry-level position. I sat back in my chair, my mind racing. Alaric had no idea I was the CEO of Techvision Solutions. I had always used my middle name, Victoria, in press releases and public appearances to maintain some privacy, and my brother had never expressed any interest in my career. But now, by pure coincidence, or perhaps because our company's rapid growth had put us in the news, he had applied for a job at my company. What would you like to do? Elowen inquired. Clearly, there is a conflict of interest here. I carefully considered my options. I could reject his application outright, which would be justified given his lack of qualifications. I could recuse myself entirely from the process and let the hiring team make their decision without knowing about our relationship. Or I could use this opportunity to finally show my brother the truth about my life and success. I want you to treat his application like any other, I ended up saying. If he doesn't meet the basic qualifications, he shouldn't proceed to an interview. Elowen paused. On paper, he's not qualified, she conceded, but he did mention some contacts with possible clients that the team believed may be useful. They advanced him to the next round despite his lack of technical qualifications. Connections. He was constantly promoted based on who he knew rather than what he could do. When is his interview scheduled? I asked. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. I made a decision. I will not be personally involved in the hiring process. That would be unethical. But I would like to observe the interview. Could you please arrange for me to sit in anonymously? Please introduce myself solely as a senior board member. Elowen nodded. We can do it. The panel will not mention your name or title. After Elowen left, I sat staring at Alaric's resume, emotions swirling inside me. Part of me felt guilty for what might appear to be a setup, but another part, the part that had been rejected and dismissed for years, wanted Alaric to finally see me for who I truly was, not just his overlooked sister, but a successful CEO who had built something meaningful through hard work and determination. That night, I barely slept. I rehearsed in my mind how I would behave during the interview, professional, detached, fair. I wouldn't let our personal history influence my judgment, but I also wouldn't pretend to be less than I was. For once, Alaric would see me clearly, free of our parents' distorted lens. The next day, I dressed with extra care in a tailored navy suit, my hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and I headed to the conference room where the interviews were being held, taking a seat at the far end of the table with the other observers. I reviewed Alaric's resume once more, and prepared a few technical questions that would challenge him without being unfair. At precisely 2 p.m., Elowen and Alaric entered, and my breath caught in my throat. I hadn't seen my brother in person in over a year, and he appeared older and more polished in his fine suit. He carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never been told he wasn't good enough. For a moment, I was that little girl again, watching from the sidelines as my parents lavished attention on their golden child. But then I remembered where I was, in the company I had built from nothing, sitting in a position of leadership I had earned through years of hard work. I straightened my shoulders, ready for whatever came next. The Takishan Solutions headquarters, located on the top 3 floors of a gleaming skyscraper in downtown Seattle, had a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and stunning views of Puget Sound. The walls were adorned with modern art, and I could tell from Alaric's expression when he walked in that the room had served its purpose. Elowen presented the interview panel, Seren from HR, whom Alaric had spoken with on the phone, Lucian, the technical director, and Thalia, the current senior project manager. She then motioned to the spectator area, where I sat with 2 other executives. "We also have members of our leadership team observing today," Elowen said calmly. "They'll be sitting in on several interviews to ensure consistency in our hiring process." Alaric hardly looked at us, his gaze fixed on the panel. He smiled confidently as he took his seat, fixing his tie in a move I recognized from childhood, a habit he did when he wanted to impress someone. "Thank you for the opportunity," he told me. "I've been following Touch Vision's growth, and I'm excited about the possibility of bringing my expertise to your team." Alaric had no idea what Takishan did beyond the most broad definition of tech solutions. If he had done any study on the company, he would have discovered my connection to it right away. Lucian began with the customary inquiry. "Can you tell us about your experience managing complex technical projects?" Alaric launched into a well-rehearsed response about a marketing campaign he had led at his current company. "I coordinated between multiple departments, managed a substantial budget, and delivered results that exceeded expectations," he concluded, leaning back slightly as if expecting applause. "And what project management methods did you use?" Lucian pressed. Alaric held his breath. "I believe in a flexible approach that adapts to the specific needs of each project," he answered evasively. "I don't like to be constrained by rigid methodologies." Thalia jumped in. "Could you show us how you would set up a Kanban board for a software development project?" Alaric's confidence was noticeably shaken. "Well, I would delegate that to the technical team members," he responded. "My strength is in the big picture strategy, not the day-to-day technical details." The interview continued in this manner, with Alaric seeking to evade technical questions while emphasizing his strategic vision and interpersonal abilities. When pressed on his technical understanding, he grew dismissive. "Let's be honest," he remarked with a little condescending grin. "People like me aren't hired for coding skills. We are recruited because we understand how to lead, motivate, and connect with the right individuals. I have relationships at significant corporations who may be valuable customers for Takishan." Seren, who had remained quiet, piped up. "Our senior project managers are expected to have both technical expertise and leadership abilities. They need a thorough understanding of our products in order to effectively manage their development." Alaric waved his hand dismissively. "That is what technical assistants are for. In my experience, the most successful projects are led by people who understand both business and technology. No offense, but self-made folks without suitable backgrounds frequently overlook the big picture because they are overly focused on technical details." Everyone in the room, including myself, was aware that Takishan had been developed from the ground up by self-made individuals. Elowen's brow furrowed slightly in response to my remark. "Tell us about a time when you faced a significant challenge on a project and how you overcame it," Lucian inquired, maintaining a professional tone despite the anxiety in the room. Alaric began telling a story about saving a marketing campaign when a vendor failed to deliver. "I worked through the weekend, making hundreds of calls to find a replacement vendor at the last minute," he claimed. "My boss was amazed that I managed to save the campaign single-handedly. I pressed my lips together to keep from reacting. I knew the story, it had happened at his previous job, but Alaric had not saved the campaign. His assistant had worked the weekend while Alaric took credit for her efforts. I knew this because the assistant had later applied for a position at Takishan and shared the true story during her interview." As the technical inquiries persisted, Alaric became increasingly uncomfortable, checking his watch numerous times and appearing agitated. "I think we're getting too caught up in the technical weeds," he added. "As I have stated, my value is in my strategic vision and connections. I'm being considered for numerous senior roles at other firms, so I'd love you if we could focus on how my unique skills can help Takishan." Elowen glanced at the panelists and nodded slightly. We're actually nearing the end of our scheduled time, she began. Before we wrap up, our CEO, who will make the final decision on all senior hires, would like to ask you a few questions. Alaric straightened, instantly alert. Meeting the CEO had not been included on the interview schedule. Of course, he answered, fixing his tie once more. I look forward to it. Elowen turned to face the observer section. Celine, would you like to take over? I stood and proceeded to the front of the room, watching Alaric's face progressively light up with recognition. His expression shifted from confident to perplexed, astonished, and then scared. Hello, Alaric, I responded quietly, extending my hand. It's been a while. His mouth opened and closed silently, and his hand rose to shake mine. His palm felt clammy on my flesh. You're the CEO, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. Celine Victoria Drayton, founder and CEO of Techician Solutions, I confirmed, taking the seat directly across from him. I recused myself from the initial screening process for obvious reasons, but I do make the final decisions on all senior hires. Alaric's face had lost its color, and his eyes flew about the room, looking for a way out, but he was stuck in this moment of reality. I have a few questions, I continued professionally, opening his resume folder. I see you've listed your current position as Executive Marketing Strategist, but when I contacted Hargrove Partners last week about a possible collaboration, Percival Hargrove mentioned you were a marketing associate. Could you explain the discrepancy? Alaric's eyes widened when his boss's name was mentioned. I handle executive-level projects, he stammered. It's a functional title rather than an official one. I agreed and took a note. And your resume says you know Python and Java. Could you describe briefly how you would use either language to build an API integration? I oversee teams that handle that sort of thing, he continued, tugging on his collar. As I previously mentioned, I focus on strategy, not coding. I see, I said, closing the folder. One final question. You mentioned having connections who could refer lucrative business to Techician. Could you be more explicit about those contacts and how they have translated into business results in your current position? Alaric shifted uncomfortably. Well, Marigold's father. That is my girlfriend's father. He's a partner at a major consulting firm, and my father knows several business owners in Pittsburgh who might. His voice trailed off as he realized how weak this sounded. The connections he was so proud of were, at best, second-hand, leveraging relationships that weren't even his. Thank you for your time today, Alaric, I replied, rose to close the interview. Our HR team will be in touch regarding next steps. I offered my hand again, retaining complete professionalism despite the tumult of emotions beneath the surface. Alaric shook it, still looking stunned. Thank you, he said, clutching his portfolio with quivering hands. Elowen went up to guide him out. As they approached the door, Alaric looked back at me with a mixture of uncertainty, embarrassment, and something else, perhaps a dawning realization, in his eyes. Then he was gone, and the room grew silent. Lucian let out a low whistle. Well, that was unexpected, he replied. I take it you two know each other. He's my brother, I said simply, gathering my notes. That's why I didn't participate in the original screening process. Please analyze his application based on our regular criteria, disregarding our relationship. The team nodded, but I could see the questions in their eyes. I excused myself and returned to my office, locking the door behind me. It was only then that I allowed myself to understand what had just transpired. I didn't intend to embarrass Alaric, but I also didn't shield him from the consequences of his own arrogance and lack of preparation. For once, he had been judged solely on his own merits, without our parents' influence swaying the scales in his favor. I felt no satisfaction in his discomfort, only a strange sense of closure. For years I had worked in the shadows of my family's dismissal, developing something they had never acknowledged. Now that Alaric knew the truth, it was unclear whether anything would change. I had just finished collecting my thoughts when my office phone rang. It was Elowen at the reception desk. Celine, she replied, her voice tight. Your brother is still inside the building, he's demanding to talk with you and is on the phone with someone. I guess that could be your father. I closed my eyes briefly, knowing that this was not done with Alaric. It never was. Send him in, I told him. And Elowen, thank you for handling the situation so professionally. Of course, she said. That's what we do here, handle things professionally. Despite the looming confrontation, the subtle emphasis on her final words made me grin. Whatever occurred next, I had developed a team of people who valued competence and integrity, which was worth celebrating on its own. I had scarcely recovered when Alaric stormed into my office without knocking, his face flushed with humiliation and anger. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, locking the door behind him with greater force than required. I remained sat, my voice cool and professional. "That was a job interview, Alaric, for a position you applied for." "You made me look like a fool," he yelled, pacing in front of my desk. "You ambushed me." "I did nothing of the sort," I responded calmly. "You applied to my company without even conducting basic investigation. If you had, you would have realized I was the CEO. Your lack of preparation is not my fault." He paused his pacing and looked at me incredulously. "How was I expected to know? You never discuss your work." "I've tried to talk about my work for years," I explained. "But no one in our family has ever been interested." But a simple Google search for Techvision Solutions CEO would have yielded my name and image. Alaric raked his hand through his hair, a motion reminiscent of our father's frustration. "This is just like you, Celine. They are constantly trying to outdo me and make me appear awful." I took a long breath and reminded myself to remain calm. "Alaric, I recused myself from the original screening process specifically to avoid any conflict of interest. The hiring team's appraisal was the sole reason you made it to the interview stage. I only participated at the end, as I do with all senior position interviews." "But you asked me those impossible technical questions," he lamented. "You knew I couldn't answer them." "Those were typical questions for the position you applied for," I patiently explained. "Every candidate is required to demonstrate their technical knowledge and experience. That's why the job description specifies the necessary abilities and expertise." Alaric sank into a chair across from my desk, his initial rage giving way to a sullen defensiveness. "Dad's furious," he murmured. "He's on his way here." I felt a chilly weight descend in my stomach. "Is Dad coming here, to my office?" "I contacted him shortly after the interview," Alaric acknowledged, avoiding my gaze. "He and Mom are both coming. They were already in Seattle, visiting Marigold's parents." My parents, despite several invites, had never visited me in Seattle, but they would go across the nation to meet the family of their son's fiancée. "Alaric," I explained cautiously, "this is my workplace. Whatever familial concerns we have should be addressed personally, not in my professional setting." He shrugged, expressing both hopelessness and a disregard for my boundaries. "Too late. They're probably already inside the building." As if on cue, my phone rang again, this time from the reception desk. "Miss Drayton, your parents have requested to see you. Should I send them up?" I closed my eyes briefly to center myself. "Yes, please accompany them to my office. Could you please invite Aloan and Callista to join us in about 10 minutes? Having witnesses would perhaps prevent the incident from becoming too serious." While we waited, Alaric's phone rang with a text message, which he examined with a smug smile. "Marigold's father might be interested in investing in your little company," he remarked. "That's what connections can do for you." Before I could react, the door opened, and my parents entered my office. My father, Edmund, walked in first, his face set in the severe expression I remembered from childhood scoldings, and my mother, Isolde, followed, her eyes darting about the huge corner office with obvious surprise. "Celine," my father began without a prelude. "What does this mean? You embarrassed your brother at a job interview. Is this some sort of revenge?" I stood there, retaining my professional demeanor. "Hello, Dad. Mom. Please take a seat. This does not have to be confrontational." "Don't tell me how this needs to be," my father screamed, still rising. "Alaric tells us you ambushed him, asked him impossible questions, and made him look incompetent." "I did nothing of the such," I said quietly. "Alaric sought for a top position at my company without knowing I was the CEO. The questions he was asked were standard for all candidates applying for that position." My mother, who had taken a seat next to Alaric, asked, "What is your company? Are you the CEO here?" She gazed around the office again, admiring the awards on the wall, the view of the Seattle skyline, and the obvious signs of success. "Yes, Mom. I started Techvision Solutions 6 years ago. I'm the CEO and main shareholder." I couldn't keep the pride out of my voice. My father brushed it away impatiently. "That isn't the point. The point is, Alaric needs this job, and you have the ability to aid him. That is what family does." "The position Alaric applied for requires technical skills and experience he doesn't have," I told him. "It wouldn't be fair to other candidates or to the company to hire someone unqualified because of family connections." "So you're unwilling to aid your brother?" my father demanded, his voice rising. After everything we've done for you? Something inside me snapped at those words. What have you done for me? I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. And what precisely would that be, Dad? My father was surprised by my tone. We raised you, educated you. No, I said, stunning everyone in the room, including myself. You reared me but did not teach me. I worked 3 jobs to pay for college, and you paid for Alaric's expensive university. You've never supported my profession, expressed interest in my accomplishments, and most recently, barred me from attending Christmas because you feared I'd humiliate you in front of Alaric's girlfriend. My mother exclaimed, "That's not what happened." It's exactly what happened, I stated firmly. Dad contacted me a week before Christmas and told me not to come because Alaric was bringing Marigold and you wanted to show her family that you were respectable. Those were his exact words. Alaric looked uneasily at our parents. I didn't know about that, he muttered quietly. Of course you didn't, I told you. You were too busy sending me photos of the Christmas celebration I was excluded from. My father's face had turned scarlet. This is absurd. We're getting off subject. The problem here is the job. No, Dad, I interrupted again. The problem here is much larger than a job. The problem is that I've always been considered as inferior to Alaric. I've worked really hard to build this firm, to create something significant, and not one of you has expressed true interest or pride in what I've accomplished. A knock on the door broke the strained silence that followed. Alawan and Callista entered with professionally neutral statements. You wanted us to join you, Celine? Alawan stated. Yes, thank you, I responded, grateful for their attendance. Mom and Dad, this is Alawan Price, our HR director, and Callista Rowan, my executive assistant. They're here to help us clarify our hiring procedures. My father frowned at the visitors. This is a family matter. Actually, I answered firmly, this started as a professional issue. Alaric applied for a position with my company. The fact that we are related does not affect our employment policies or procedures. Alawan moved ahead. Mr. Drayton, we have a rigorous and fair hiring process. All candidates are evaluated using the same criteria. The job description clearly outlines the exact technical abilities and expertise required for the senior project manager position. My father turned back to me and said, You are the CEO, you may make an exception. I could, I said, but I won't. My company's success is dependent on placing the right individuals in the appropriate positions. Alaric is not qualified for a senior position. Is that it? My father demanded. You're abandoning your family? No, I answered, my voice firm. I am upholding the professional integrity of the organization I founded. However, I added, looking at Alaric, we do have entry-level roles in the marketing department that may be suitable. You would have to start at the bottom and work your way up, learning the essential skills along the way, but there would be room for advancement. Alaric appeared upset. Entry-level? I have 5 years of marketing experience. Yes, I acknowledged, but not in technical project management at our company. Those are different career paths. This is insane, my father exclaimed. You are torturing your brother because of your own fears. Always attempting to show that you're superior than everyone else. Dad, I've developed a $200 million firm from nothing. I had a flash of rage, but I kept my voice controlled. I employ more than 200 people. I do not need to prove anything to anyone. What I'm attempting to do is build a great firm on merit and hard work, not nepotism. My mother, who had been unusually silent, eventually spoke up. Celine, after all these years, can you put your resentment aside and help your brother? Family should come first. That's a convenient principle to cite right now, I responded. Where was family first when you excluded me from Christmas, or when you refused to help me with my college education, or when you brushed off my career as a phase for years? My mother had the grace to appear uncomfortable. Things weren't always perfect, but they still aren't, I gently interrupted. But I'm not going to refuse to help Alaric. I'm providing him with a legitimate opportunity to join the company at the appropriate level and learn the business properly. That's more aid than I've ever received. My father shook his head, disgusted. This is pointless. Come on, Isolde, Alaric, we are leaving. Your sister has made her decision. Alaric rose up and jerkily straightened his suit jacket. I wouldn't work for you anyway, he muttered, his voice heavy with wounded pride. I have other opportunities. As they turned to depart, I called after them. Alaric, the offer stands. If you change your mind, Please contact Alawan directly. My father ushered my mother and brother toward the door, but as they approached, my mother paused and turned back to look at me, possibly for the first time in years. Her expression was complicated, a mix of perplexity, resentment, and something else, perhaps recognition. Your office is lovely, she added quietly. You've done well for yourself. It wasn't an apology or a congratulation, but it was something, some acknowledgement, however little, of the life I'd created. Following their departure, Elowen and Callista stayed, both looking anxious. Are you all right? Callista inquired. I took a big breath and nodded. Yes. Actually, for the first time in a long time, I believe I am. Because standing my ground, speaking my truth, and refusing to reduce myself to make others comfortable felt liberating. It seemed like I was finally becoming the person I was always supposed to be. After 2 weeks without hearing from my family, I put myself into work, finalizing our European development plans and coordinating the transition to our new, larger office space. The confrontation with my parents and Alaric had been unpleasant, but it had also been clarifying. For the first time, I spoke my truth without apologizing for my success or downplaying my accomplishments to make others comfortable. It was Sunday afternoon, and I was relaxing on my sofa with a book and a cup of tea when my phone rang. It was my apartment building's security desk. Miss Drayton, your parents have requested to see you. Should I send them up? I sat up straight, shocked. My parents had never been to my place before, and after a moment of doubt, I consented to let them in. When I opened the door, I noticed how much older my parents were compared to 2 weeks previously. My father's shoulders were slightly bent, and my mother's grin was cautious and doubtful. Celine, my mother murmured softly. Thank you for visiting us. We should have contacted beforehand, but we weren't sure you'd be willing to meet. Come in, I said, stepping aside so they might enter. They came into my living room, taking in the modern furnishings, the floor-to-ceiling windows with views of the city, and the tasteful art on the walls. I observed my mother's eyes searching for family photos, but finding none. Can I get you some water, tea, and coffee? I offered, relying on civility to get beyond the awkwardness. No, thank you, my father replied, becoming calmer than he had been in my office. We won't be staying long. We sat down, my parents on the sofa and me in an armchair across from them. For a moment, no one talked. Alaric lost his job, my father finally remarked, getting to the point. The day after we saw you, his boss found out he'd been interviewing elsewhere and let him go. Percival Hargrove was well known for his aversion to disloyalty, so I nodded without surprise. He's been looking for other positions, but nothing has come through yet, my mother explained. And Marigold, she broke up with him last week. Said she needs to concentrate on her career. I felt a twinge of sorrow for my brother. Losing a career and a relationship in the same week was a devastating blow for anyone. I'm sorry to hear that, I answered truly. Is he all right? My parents exchanged looks. He's staying with us for now, my mother added. He's struggling. I waited, thinking there was more to say, until my father cleared his throat. Celine, about what happened at your office and at Christmas. He paused, apparently struggling to continue. What your father is trying to convey, my mother said, is that we've been thinking. And some are realizing. Realize what? I inquired, keeping my tone calm. That we've been unkind to you, my mother said. We didn't see for a long time. We did not want to see how hard you worked or what you had accomplished. We were wrong to exclude you from Christmas. It was cruel, my father said gruffly. The statement astonished me because I couldn't recall ever hearing my father admit he was wrong about anything. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Is it because you want me to hire Alaric? My father's face heated. Partly, he said with surprising honesty, but also because seeing your office and firm made us realize we didn't really know you, Celine. We were so focused on Alaric and what we wanted for him that we never noticed what you were building. And we should have. We should have been proud of you, my mother said softly. We should have supported you. I felt a complex combination of feelings, including affirmation, lingering hurt, and cautious hope. It's not too late, I said, to get to know each other. But it must be different. I will not undervalue myself or my accomplishments in order to make others feel better. Not anymore. My father nodded slowly. We get it now. At least we're trying. About Alaric, my mother said tentatively. The offer I made still exists, I answered. He can apply for an entry-level position in our marketing department. He and everyone else will have to earn any promotions depending on their performance. But I'll make certain he receives fair attention. That's more than fair, my father agreed. I'll talk to him. After a little period of silence, my mother inquired, "How did you do it, Celine? Build everything on your own?" For the first time in my adult life, my mother inquired about my work with genuine interest, and I began to tell her about Taekishin's early days, the hurdles and breakthroughs, the hard nights and modest successes that had led to where I was now. As I spoke, I noticed a shift in my parents' expressions. Not just acknowledgement, but a newfound respect. They were finally recognizing me as a successful woman who had produced something substantial through her own work, rather than their daughter who needed to stay in her place. When they left an hour later, nothing had been totally resolved. Years of dismissal and favoritism couldn't be erased in a single chat, but a door had been opened, creating the prospect of a different type of connection in the future. The following week, Alaric called Aloan to inquire about the entry-level marketing position. He sounded somber, humbled by recent events. Aloan put him through the usual application procedure, and he was interviewed by the marketing team without any special consideration. To my surprise, he took the post when it was offered, despite the huge pay drop from his former employment. On his first day, he came to my office, frightened but determined. "I want to do this well," he stated. "Learn the business properly. Earn my place. That's all anyone is asking," I said. "And Celine," he said. "I apologize. About Christmas, about a variety of topics." I nodded, accepting his apology without taking it too lightly. "Show me with actions, not words, Alaric. That is how trust is rebuilt." As spring went to summer, modest changes began to take place. My mother called on a daily basis, inquiring about my work with genuine curiosity. My father was slower to adjust, but he made his own attempts by sending me articles about the software business or asking questions about Taekishin's expansion plans. Alaric shocked everyone by taking his new job seriously, arriving early, staying late, and soaking up knowledge from his coworkers. He still had moments of entitlement and occasionally wanted special treatment, but he was learning and maturing. In July, I received another invitation, this time to my parents' anniversary dinner, with no indication of who would or would not be welcome, and no strings attached. It was simply an opportunity to celebrate with family. As I confirmed my attendance, I reflected on the past 6 months. The painful Christmas exclusion had been a catalyst for change, forcing long-buried issues into the open. The confrontation in my office had been uncomfortable but necessary, allowing for honesty after years of polite fiction. We were not a perfect family, and we never would be. There was too much history, too many ingrained patterns to overcome completely. But we were finding a new way forward, based on truth, respect, and the recognition that family relationships, like anything worthwhile, require work and commitment from all sides. Standing up for myself did not ruin my family, as I had feared for so many years. Rather, it allowed something more true to sprout from the ashes of old expectations and assumptions. Something that, with time and work, may grow stronger and more important than what came before. For the time being, that possibility sufficed.